capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number? Or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know, Zach.
It's a tough one. I
It's
know.
really hard.
And maybe comparing numbers is not Jeremy's strong suit. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. So tonight we are gonna start by talking out. Epic Prawn, good to see you already. We're gonna start by talking about the history of the Supreme Court and some of the major figures and ways that it has viewed the Constitution over the years. And joining me tonight is Dan Plaat of the Three Left Show. How you doing tonight, Dan?
Also can be known as What's Left in Albany.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You are making the changeover now. So,
and it's not complete, obviously. I haven't made new logos or lit or anything, but I did change my Facebook page, so now Left Show, What's Left in Albany. I'm not getting rid of Three Lefts because it's what the website's called, and I don't want to deal with changing that. But otherwise, last week I did record my first hour episode where I talked about an action in the local city court where, so basically a woman of color was beaten up by state troopers, or maybe she just sprained her ankle, but she was hurt by the state troopers in New York State Capitol. So you had local BLM and others go to city court as she was being arraigned because, of course, not only was she injured, she was arrested and charged with something. So meanwhile, it was a woman also getting arrested by the cops in city court because she had her phone out, but she wasn't recording anything, but they said she was. And all the while, this is the news, a bunch of Madagascar hissing cockroaches were unleashed in the courtroom. And so,
what?
Yes, a flood of them. Enough that
wow.
The court had to be closed for the day to get rid of them. So this disrupted not only the parking tickets, but maybe whatever evictions were on the docket and whatever criminal justice system shenanigans would have happened that day didn't happen. So it was a disruption of just the day. But it was an interesting story. So that I covered how in my area there's the landlord's lobby, and they rebranded themselves and also went statewide. Talked about them.
Lobby.
Yeah, how they talked about the just cause eviction law that wasn't in this year's budget. It's not dead, but it didn't happen this year. That's the thing with good legislation in New York. You basically it needs to be brought up 3 years in a row before it's actually put in the budget. That has to wait its turn because the New York State government can only do like one good thing a year. That's what it feels like. Then the last thing I finished with talking about how we have a warehouse district that's being gentrified, and a story about that. So it's just local news for me, but that's where the direction I'm going. But I will be interviewing local activists and other people, trying to. The long-term goal is, of course, to be some kind of player in Albany politics and be known personally, but also sharing my point of view as well as the strategies for organizing, which will be evolving as we have a Albany County chapter of the Green Party. On a lighter note, what did I want to discuss before we started? Just a thought I had about programs, shows with a large cast, not always very popular, but I like shows with large casts or lots of characters because versus a show or a movie where there's just a the hero and their
Just
three
a set
friends.
few. Yeah, right.
And because when it comes to real history and how things really get done, it takes a lot of people. There's always a lot of
Absolutely.
people involved with things. So when there's a show like I'm thinking of certain show-ins like Bleach or Full Metal Alchemist, and My Hero Academia is included in this. You just have lots of characters, and they can each character can get an episode, so you get to know them. Some people want really deep characters, like they want, well, a lot of American TV is just like Walter White and the Tony Soprano types, just explore that person for many hours.
Mhm.
But I rather have a lot of people and get to see them all work together or against each other, whatever is happening. I like that a lot more. So anyway,
Yeah, no, I definitely like that too.
we're not doing a comprehensive history of the Supreme Court, but
No.
I wanted to cover some Supreme Court cases between the years of Reconstruction and the New Deal era. This is an era of American history that is just not really covered in depth ever. It's glossed over. There's a labor movement. There's World War One. It's just like sometimes American history is just a series of wars, and you just kind of cover it like war to war to war, and who was the president. But there's always so much more happening movement wise. It's how our
Right.
today is the same. It works the same, rather, not to say everything's completely the same. There is evolution, and so that you can take a step back and have some critical historical analysis. I especially like this series, which is like a three-part, I think it was 4 parts, but it's called Great Issues in American History, and it's basically a paperback of primary source documents. So court cases, speeches, excerpts of other writings, important to a general breadth of American history, working outside of course, people's history of the U.S.
Mhm.
And I really liked reading this when I was in early college because it really elucidated just what an impediment the Supreme Court is to any progress, and how
Yeah, that's for sure.
part, and that sort of like many institutions, maybe this is endemic to any institutions, kind of where the insurrectionist, like we should never have any organization whatsoever comes in, because as soon as you have an organization or an institution, you're usually building in rules to ensure that when the next generation or the next cohort takes your place, they can't change it. Like, not only is there maybe an ingrained culture, but even if their culture is different, you can't change the institution. It comes up in conversation when I talk to union people who are actually union officers, not just outsiders to unionism or what have you. I was at a wedding and I was talking to a boyfriend of a cousin of mine, and he is a representative in the teachers union. And he's very cynical. It's like, oh, people are stupid. This is what you learn when you're an officer in a union. People are just like, and it's like, there's a culture of service, like that he's probably reinforcing, that people have problems and you solve them. You're just a service provider. You're not helping them solve the problem. He also talked of how you had school districts where it didn't make sense for them to pay dues because the teachers were actually a minority of the workers there. So they would forego having a vote. They would still be represented, but they wouldn't pay dues because dues equal votes. But they didn't care about having a vote because in their district, they would be in a minority versus the cooks and the bus drivers and the janitors. So they're like, forget it. We're always going to be outvoted. They're going to vote for the contract or the deal that benefits them more than us. And apparently our negotiator can't balance our interests, I guess.
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Because it's still politics, I guess. But it's like, well, why couldn't their votes matter more or have more weight, or there's more ranked choice ballot or something, But when they're voting for a contract, it's just up or down. But it's like, but he said, like, it's just so hard to change something because people are afraid of change, even when they didn't construct how things work. So the Supreme Court is one of those institutions that were created to make sure that, and this is the Senate's the same, the most American institutions, the Electoral College, all to ensure that they're not there just for being racist or whatever, but they're there to make sure that future generations do not change the order of things.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court is one of those major key things. So let's start with a tale. We're going to look at, is this really the first one? Yes, it is. Okay. So the first, in 1873, document 15 of this book. And by the way, these are all $10. They're really easy to get. Slaughterhouse cases. This case, the first interpretation by the Supreme Court of the 14th Amendment, largely nullified the Privileges and Immunities Clause of that amendment. Within 5 years of its ratification, it took 5 years to basically defang the 14th Amendment. That's the one that gives Black people rights, citizenship. Anyway, so after this decision, Negroes were unable to invoke that clause to protect their civil rights against acts of the states. The case arose from a measure passed by the legislature of Louisiana in 1869, giving what amounted to a monopoly grant of the business of slaughtering livestock in New Orleans to one company of that city. The other butchers appealed to the Supreme Court on the ground that the law, by taking away their businesses, derived them of their privileges and immunities as citizens of the U.S., guaranteed under the 14th Amendment. The court rejected their appeal by a 5-4 vote. Speaking through Justice Samuel Miller, it took the position quite as disastrous to the legal position of Negroes as to the appeal of the New Orleans butchers, that there is a distinction between U.S. citizenship and citizenship of a state. The 14th Amendment, so it's like hyper federalism, which is where we're going. It's sort of where we are. Hot take. The 14th Amendment, the court found, banned the impairment by states of privileges and immunities enjoined by persons as citizens of the U.S. But the amendment did not speak of their rights as citizens of the states. Most of the civil rights of the individual, the court argued, were in fact derived from his state citizenship, not federal citizenship, and thus could not be protected against state action under the 14th Amendment. Next is the Civil Rights Cases, 1883. In the Second Civil Rights Act of 1875, the radicals in Congress, because there's still radical Republicans there, attempted to protect the civil equality of Negroes by making it a punishable offense to deprive them of accommodations and advantages in inns, public conveyances, and theaters. In the civil rights cases, the court, speaking through Justice Joseph P. Bradley, made it impossible to enforce this law, which was held to have no constitutional basis in either 14th or 15th Amendments.
Doesn't that sound familiar?
Now that's the just the intro. Let me know if you want me to actually read because they're usually like 3 pages long. But I'll
brief
go forward.
Overview is okay.
Yeah, let's see. Well, these are legal documents. They're not quite
not exactly.
Let's see.
Written for the public.
The power of Congress to adopt direct and primary as distinguished from coercive legislation on the subject in hand is sought in the second place from the 13th Amendment, which abolishes slavery. It is true that slavery cannot exist without law any more than property and lands and goods can exist without law, and therefore the 13th Amendment may be regarded as nullifying all state laws which establish or uphold slavery. But it has a reflex character also, establishing and decreeing universal civil and political freedom throughout the U.S., and it is assumed that the power vested in Congress to enforce the article by appropriate legislation clothes Congress with power to pass all laws necessary and proper for abolishing all badges and incidents of slavery in the U.S. And upon this assumption, it is claimed that this is sufficient authority for declaring by law that all persons shall have equal accommodations. He's just saying, like, this
sounds about right. Yeah,
this is what the Fed thinks it can do. Congress thinks it can do, but it can't because the Constitution doesn't say it can. But there is any similarity between such servitudes and a denial So here's where we get into libertarian speak of like, well, saying you can't stay at my inn is not the same as enslaving you. And if you say I can, then isn't that the same as slavery?
Oh,
But
yeah, that's right.
here's the paragraph here. But is there any similarity between such servitudes and a denial by the owner of an inn, a public conveyance, or theater of its accommodation and privileges to an individual, even though the denial be founded on the race or color of that individual? Where does any slavery or servitude or badge of either arise from such an act of denial? Whether it might not be a denial of a right, which, well, it's linked by blackness. It's linked by blackness. Anyway, would it be? But black is not a legal term. You see, it's not in the Constitution.
Yeah, I guess there's no business.
Business rights are there,
on
and property rights are there, but not black. Okay, where does so whether it might be a denial or a right which, if sanctioned by the state law, would be obnoxious to the prohibitions of the 14th Amendment is another question. But what has it to do with the question of slavery? The long existence of it, and this is 1883. It's been a dozen years.
Yeah.
So the long existence of African slavery in this country gave us very distinct notions of what it was, and what were its necessary incidents. Compulsory service of the slave for the benefit of the master. And it goes on. It's basically saying, like, even a dozen years after slavery ended, it's the same type of, well, the problem's over. What are you complaining about, black people? There's no discrimination happening here.
Yeah, it's the Ben Shabibo.
But even if there is, Congress can't do anything about it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's like the Ben Shabibo. Well, where does it say in the law that this is discrimination?
It has not changed an iota, but that's conservatism for you.
Yep.
So I'm gonna skip ahead. When a man has emerged from slavery and by the aid of beneficent legislation has shaken off the insufferable concomitants of that state, there must be some stage in the process of his elevation when he takes the rank of a mere citizen and ceases to be the special favorite of the laws, and when his rights as a citizen or man are to be protected in the ordinary modes by which other men's rights are protected. There were thousands of free colored people in this country before the abolition of slavery, enjoying all the essential rights of life, liberty, and property the same as white citizens.
I'm sure it was exactly the same.
By the way, that would be a theme if I read more of these decisions for the majorities. The theme will be they will say outright lies. They will say things that are completely incorrect by any standard, and only can be taken positions that can only be taken when you have, as a video by the Boondocks called it, a moat of ignorance around you. Which is something suburbia,
I like that term.
Suburbia and pastoral life creates.
Absolutely.
Okay. Mere discriminations on account of race or color were not regarded as badges of slavery. People weren't slaves because they were black.
No.
That's what he's saying. So if since that time the enjoyment of equal rights in all these respects have become established by constitutional enactment, it is not by force of the 13th Amendment, which merely abolishes slavery, but by force of the 14th and 15th. On the whole, we are of the opinion that no continence of authority for the passage of the law in question can be found in the 13th or 14th Amendments. So, this was Justice Bradley, party fuck you from the future. So next is the first of many, the dissenting opinion of John Marshall Harlan. The vicious Kentucky jurist John Marshall Harlan was a strong defender of civil rights and wrote a number of notable dissents in this area. He himself considered this opinion to be his best, though the eloquence of his dissent in Plessy V Ferguson has been much more admired over the years. So Harlan is a breath of fresh air versus anything, because basically Harlan is like, he just sees reality and is like, well, we need to actually We need to rule like in alignment of what realities are, and not just what's in the Constitution or what's in the law. So the opinion in these cases proceeds, it seems to me, upon grounds entirely too narrow and artificial, which is usually the case when courts rule against rights for anyone. I cannot resist the conclusion that the substance and spirit of the recent amendments of the Constitution have been sacrificed by a subtle and ingenious verbal criticism. Constitutional provisions, adopted in the interest of liberty and for the purpose of securing through national legislation, if need be, rights inherent in the state of freedom. He basically talks like an SJW. We can get to that.
Mhm.
Anyway,
Mhm.
no state can sustain her denial to colored citizens of other states while within her limits of the privileges or immunities fundamental in Republican citizenship, upon the ground that she accords such privileges or immunities only to her white ones and withholds them to her colored ones. The colored citizens of the states within the jurisdiction of that state could claim every privilege and immunity which that state, blah, 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 blah. Okay, onward to, what do you think it is? Plessy V Ferguson. Maybe you've heard of this one.
Hey, yeah.
This is 18. Now we're fast forwarding an entire 15 years, 1896. So this, by the way, this is in the section of the book that's about Reconstruction. So the sections of the book, the chapters, so to speak, are divided based on the issues, not on the time frame. So there'll be so these are just all the race-based decisions. So Plessy V Ferguson. This decision approved segregation of the races as being consistent with the 14th Amendment and formulated the doctrine of, say it, Zach, what's the doctrine called? Separate but equal.
Oh, okay.
It served as a legal basis for segregation in education.
That, yeah.
The case arose when one Homer Plessy, who was 78th Caucasian and 1/8 black, was arrested for entering a railroad coach reserved for whites and refusing to sit in a segregated coach for blacks, established in accordance with Louisiana law 1890. The court, speaking through Justice Henry Brown, found that these separate but equal accommodations satisfied the 14th Amendment. That's the thing. Plessy is probably white passing, but he's 1/8 black. Okay.
Yep, and that's that one drop.
Amazing. Okay, so the constitutionality of this act is attacked upon the ground that is it okay if I skip this? Just stop me if you want me to read it. If you,
that's fine.
I'd rather push forward. Intro to Harlan's dissent in Plessy Ferguson. Justice Harlan stood alone. He was alone in his opinion when he wrote it, but he foreshadowed the views that were to be expressed by the court 58 years later in Brown versus Board of Education, which overruled Plessy v. Ferguson. This is shorter, so maybe I'll read it. In respect of civil rights common to all citizens, the Constitution of the United States does not, I think, permit in any public authority to know the race of those entitled to be protected in the enjoyment of those rights. Law should be blind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every true man has pride of race, and under appropriate circumstances, when the rights of others, his equals before the law, are not to be affected. It is his privilege to express such pride and to take such action based upon it as it to him seems proper. But I deny that any legislative body or judicial tribunal may have regard to the race of citizens when the civil rights of those citizens are involved. Indeed, such legislation as that here in question is inconsistent not only with that equality of rights which pertains to citizenship, national and state, but with the personal liberty enjoyed of everyone. The white race deems itself to be the dominant race in this country, and so it is in prestige, in achievements, in education, in wealth, and in power. So I doubt not it will continue to be for some time, if it remains true to its great heritage and hold fast to principles of constitutional liberty. But in view of the Constitution, in the eye of the law, there is in this country no superior, dominant, ruling class of citizens. That's our very idealistic, isn't it? There is no caste here. Our Constitution is colorblind, and well, until you get to the 3/5. But
yeah, that's a little bit of some colors.
Well, let's see. Was 3/5 was in the Constitution, right? It wasn't
I
just
believe it
added
was, yeah.
later.
Yeah.
Our
I'll
humblest of the
look it
peer
up.
of the most powerful, the law regards man as man and takes no account of his surroundings or of his color, when his civil rights are guaranteed by the Supreme Court of the U.S. No, just rights are universal, and that's where you leave it. Okay, so his grandpa was black, and he got arrested for riding up front. Yeah, James, that's pretty much it. And yes, this is and all of the majority opinions I'm going to be reading are pretty much just originalists, and that conservatism just doesn't change. It just really doesn't.
No.
Only their
No.
standard
It's
of
kind
what
of its
they
thing.
think they're conserving. So,
Right.
like,
Their idealized past.
original conservatives in the French Revolution were conserving feudalism. And ever since, conservatives have been let's see if we can tack a date to when conservatives stopped defending feudalism and just became like defenders of capitalism. Maybe it was the Russian Revolution that was a turning point. Was it I think it was maybe the 1860s, 1850s, when you have the formation of labor unions and a left wing. I mean, beyond liberalism, you had trade unions, and that's probably when liberals are then become the new conservatives, capitalists, and so on. But you'd still have conservatives still be like, well, we need to maintain a monarchy, even if it's ceremonial or not as powerful. Okay, moving on to the next one, and I believe this is the next one. Yep. So we're in the industrialism and social reform section here. This one, and again, these are cases like I never heard of. You probably haven't heard of. This one is Pollock v. Farmers Loan and Trust Company, 1895.
Ooh, definitely have not heard of that one.
Okay, let me take a drink. It was 90 today.
Oh yeah, you're getting all of our hot weather from a few days ago.
It's moving on, but it's here. Okay. When a 2% tax on incomes over $4,000 was incorporated in the Wilson-Gorman Tariff of 1894, so this is like the first income tax, a test case was quickly arranged to bring the constitutionality of the measure before the court. An income tax had been passed during the Civil War and had been retained for some years afterward. Its constitutionality, never attacked while it was in effect, had later been firmly asserted by the court in Springer v. U.S. in 81. Nonetheless, the Pollock case, coming at a time of social upheaval and when the extraordinary conservative body of justices sat on the court, so you take your opportunity and you sue. You couldn't sue during the Civil War and during Reconstruction, right? Radical Republicans actually controlled Congress then. And they probably didn't approve conservative judges. Because obviously the ones ruling on Plessy V Ferguson, who knows how long they were there. So the conservative body of justices sat on the court, took a new and surprising tact, which made this, after the Dred Scott case, the most widely criticized decision in the court's history. The tone of the opposition to the tax was struck by Joseph Coat, who appealed to the justices to halt the communist march, as he called the current plan for social reform.
Oh, wow. They don't even have new insults. It's still everything is communism that I don't like.
They didn't have to change it. So, tone of the opposition to the tax respect. See, it's always been the left that has changed its branding in response, thinking that it works. To think that they don't have to change what they say. And that's why, from the aughts on, I always thought such people were spineless cowards and weren't helpful. Even today, like, the meme of like we're rioting, but the picture of them rioting is saying a sign, but instead like it has just a more impolite message to the Supreme Court. That's them rioting, saying "fuck you, Supreme Court."
Right.
Look at how extreme I am.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. The case was heard twice. In its first presentation, the issue was whether a tax upon rents or income issuing out of lands was constitutional. In the light of the clauses, because until then, until some certain points, only commerce was taxed. You really didn't have taxes on property or income or what have you. It was always, or income from property. You either taxed the value of property or you taxed trade, and that was enough for a bit until the Civil War. Because that was, you had a government that just didn't spend any money. They didn't do anything. They didn't build nothing.
Right.
It was always, things like the Erie Canal were private ventures, but that's kind of why they were so limited. The Erie Canal is held up like this really big thing, but if you actually go and look at it, it's not that impressive. It's not impressive. It's nothing compared to the New Deal projects. The viaduct that carries water from the Catskills to New York City. But anyway, totally different levels of technology. But continuing on here. In the light of the clauses of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, and Section 9, Clause 4, which provide that direct, quote-unquote, direct taxes may be appropriated among the states according to their population as established for representation in the House, and which prohibit any capitulation or other direct tax unless levied in proportion to the census enumeration. You can only tax people as much as you're giving in public spending, which is why it's really stupid to say we need to tax churches, because that means then churches are then need to be like, they can get subsidies. They'll be able to apply for grants and all things, because their tax-free status is the deal we make for them not for us not having publicly financed religious schools, which is where the land wants to go.
That seems like such a stretch. I mean, they're still built along public. No. They're still built on public roads. They still have public utilities connected to them. The people that go to these churches are free to send their children to public schools. They can avail themselves.
They don't want to.
Well, yeah. So that's the thing, is if you want to not use a public service and instead privatize it, I see no reason why the state should have to finance that.
Well, as we we have this yearly season of the time of year where the Supreme Court decisions for the year basically are announced. It's not a drip feed over the year. Like they kind of work on their decisions over the year, and then they just they don't get announced. I wish they were announced as one big story, like an NFL draft. But instead they're all covered separately, which maybe lends to this feeling of everything's going wrong, because you just see one day after, one every week in June, you just get that negative story of Supreme Court does us dirty. Okay. So on the first hearing, the court, by a vote of 6-2, found that a tax on income from land, in order to be constitutional, must be apportioned according to population. The question remaining whether a tax on other forms of income was also to fall under the court's ban. Justice Howell Jackson, who had been ill during the first argument of the case, returned, and the entire court, which had been divided 4-4 on important questions raised by this case, now heard a re-argument. By a 5-4 vote, the court decided that taxes on income from personal property were direct taxes, precisely as were taxes on income from land, and were therefore unconstitutional. A roar of indignation went up throughout the country, though many conservatives were happy at what they considered a blow to populism. Because of this decision, the 16th Amendment had to be passed in 1913 before income taxes could be levied. This is pretty long, but let's see if there's a question mark here. The Constitution prohibits any direct tax unless in proportion to numbers as ascertained by census. And in light of the circumstances to which we have referred, is it not an evasion of that prohibition to hold that a general unapportioned tax imposed upon all property owners as a body for or in respect of their property is not direct in the meaning of the Constitution, because confined to the income therefore. So a lot of these decisions, like today, it's like they're not wrong in their reasoning, but they're just wrong in what they think matters. They think that what's in the original documentation of like what's written in the Constitution is what matters. Because as far as jurisprudence is concerned, and this was mentioned in a future writing here, is that like, well, people, if you really want us to rule differently, then you need to vote for people that will change the Constitution. You know, then it's not really up to us. We're only working with what we are given, which is the law. And if it's the white man's law or the rich man's law, that's your problem, not ours, which is what makes them a reactionary institution in that way. That they can only reinforce the status quo. But that's the lie that like they're a neutral arbiter. They reinforce the status quo with their decisions. Because in order to change the Constitution, it's incredibly difficult. It was made so we couldn't change it.
Right.
But we were able to. So maybe we just need to look at how the parties functioned in a way that you actually had enough legislators vote for constitutional amendments, like the 16th.
Right.
How is it that you had the same business interests in World War I operating, capitalism was still in effect. You didn't really have you had a labor movement, but it certainly wasn't strong enough. It wasn't in control of Congress, right? You had, just like now, you had like a squad amount of legislators that were maybe actually radical. But somehow you had enough legislators in enough states voting in favor of income taxes. How was that? How was that?
I don't know.
That
makes me less optimistic about today, though, since I think even still the majority of state legislatures are conservatively controlled, if I'm not mistaken on that. So the idea that they
I can't imagine they were controlled by liberals in World War I, though.
Yeah, I guess I don't know.
Because what did a liberal mean then? You know, both parties then were also, maybe because it wasn't partisan, you had an equal.
Oh, that could be.
Because both parties, Republican and Democrat, were equal amounts labor or worker or other, other interests, and the other half were business interests. You know, it didn't really matter what state or city you were in. It was just seemed more equal. It was just more split. I think maybe the imbalance now is that it's only the left wing of the Dems that are populist. While back in the past, you had half of the Republicans being populist. And it was, I suppose, the postmodernism that destroyed that. And a lot of other things, of course.
Interesting.
So here is, once again, Harlan's dissenting opinion on Pollock v. Farmers Loan and Trust Company. Justice Harlan, along with three of his brethren, dissented from the decision in the Pollock case. The New York Sun, reporting the event, said that in delivering his dissent, Justice Harlan, quote, pounded the desk, shook his finger under the noses of the Chief Justice and Justice Field, turned more than once, almost angrily, upon his colleagues in the majority, and expressed his dissent from their conclusions in a tone and language more appropriate to a stump addressed at a populist barbecue than to an opinion on a question of law before the Supreme Court. This man needs some statues on top. If there, maybe there's one in Kentucky, but there needs to be this guy needs to be held up as
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Whatever Harlan's manner, his dissent, of which only a small part appears here, was a long and learned discussion of the historical and legal issues raised by the direct tax question. Not only the court's precedents, but the records of the Federal Convention of 1787 bore out his arguments. For the direct tax clauses had been intended to apply only to the taxation of land and of persons, meaning slaves, having been passed to meet the demands of Southerners in the convention who were concerned lest their land be taxed by its area and their slaves be taxed by their numbers. In the Hilton case of 1796, to which Justin Harlan refers, the court, two of whose justices had been members of the convention and had actually taken part in the writing of the direct tax clause, had passed clearly upon its historic meaning. Following historians of the court have generally agreed with the argument of this heated dissent, and the later Chief Justice Charles Evans Hughes once referred to the majority decision in the case as a self-inflicted wound. This is just a little bit there, but I'll read the last paragraph. The practical effect of the decision today is to give to certain kinds of property a position of favoritism and advantage inconsistent with the fundamental principles of our social organization, to invest them with power and influence that may be perilous to that portion of the American people upon whom rests the larger part of the burdens of the government, and who ought not to be subjected to the dominion of aggregated wealth any more than the property of the country should be at the mercy of the lawless. Mic drop.
Damn, spitting.
And our laws favor certain types of property all the time, and that's
yes.
what the allure of Bitcoin maybe is, that the laws really favor it in the tax code. You know?
Yeah.
You look for what's favored the most, and that's what you invest in.
Yeah, I mean, in Minnesota, we had to change our eminent domain laws after a case where they took a private car dealership, and gave it to Best Buy headquarters so they could build their big headquarters because it was more economic development that was coming in. So now we've outlawed that.
Yeah. It's always a decision of like what is, and this is gentrification in a nutshell, like what is more profitable, not only in terms of like the businesses themselves, but just like, because it's from the city's point of view, it's like, well, our priority is more property tax income so that we don't raise it on the homeowners association heads.
Yep.
So that means real estate will pay more than the doesn't even have to be a mom and pop retailer, but in the warehouse district, we have industrial businesses. They use warehouses. They're industrial. They have trucks coming in and out. They're chemical companies. They're electrical supply companies, right? They're not massive. They're not Amazon, and I can assume that the property taxes they pay are not equal to the new residential developments going in, whether or not they get an abatement or not. And that's just, it's still greed. It's just greed on the city's part, and people understand it when they get a speeding ticket. So the next one is the U.S. versus E.C. Knight and Company, 1895. The American Sugar Refining Company, by buying the stock of 4 Philadelphia sugar refining companies, had acquired a virtual monopoly of the manufacture of refined sugar in the U.S. Attorney General, so this is monopoly politics here. Attorney General Richard Onley, who never respected the Sherman Antitrust Act, nonetheless brought suit for a court order canceling the agreements under which the stock had been acquired, on the ground that these agreements created a monopoly. The question before the court was whether a monopoly in the manufacture of a product, which presumably afforded control of supply and prices, involved interstate commerce to the extent that it could be brought under the provisions of the Antitrust Act, and then controlled under the Constitution's Commerce Clause. The government's case was badly presented by Onley, because he didn't support antitrust legislation. Isn't that great? And we see that same thing happen today. Who neglected to establish the close relation between a monopoly in manufacture, which was local, and sales and distribution, which were interstate. Hence, the court ruled that commerce succeeds to manufacture and is not a part of it. The resulting decision of the court, with its powerful blow at enforcement of the Sherman Act, hardly displeased, who wrote to his secretary, quote, "You observe that the government has been defeated. I have always supposed it would and have taken the responsibility of not prosecuting under a law I believe to be no good." So, Harlan's, once again, Harlan descends to the U.S. versus the Knight and Company. Once again, alone, Harlan found that a monopoly operating within a single state, but trading across state lines, must be considered as engaged in interstate commerce.
Yeah, pretty open and shut. I would say.
But not to conservatives.
Yeah, well, of course.
And thus, federal power to regulate commerce must be extended to cover it, if the controlled monopoly was to be meaningful. His powerful dissent and the protests in the country at large against the court's decision. There was protests then too. Of course, there was. Compelled. So his dissent and protest may have impelled the court to change its view in later cases, which gave some encouragement to enforcement of the Sherman Act. An Addystone Pipe and Steel Company v. U.S., for instance, which was in 1899. The court, though it did not specifically reverse the Knight decision, allowed the Sherman Act to be applied against an industrial combination. The implications of Harlan's dissent were later followed by the court in Swift and Company v. U.S. 6 years later, in which Justin Holmes found that where a combination of control sales was demonstrated, a monopoly within a single state had an effect that was not accidental, secondary, remote, or merely probable. Okay. Skipping ahead now to the progressivism chapter. I'm going to read something that's not Supreme Court related, but it is corruption in America related. I found this pretty illuminating, and I wanted to reread it myself. It is George Washington Plunkett's Honest Graft, written in 1905. Plunkett of Tammany Hall was a skillful and candid Tammany sachem. His observations on politics, taken down by the reporter William Rodion and first published as newspaper interviews, still made rewarding reading. Plunkett's defense of quote-unquote honest graft and his disdainful account of reformers were humorously put, but they were in fact a serious statement of the attitude of political leaders of his type. Plunkett became a millionaire largely through honest graft. Everybody is talking these days about Tammany men growing rich on graft, but nobody thinks of drawing the distinction between honest graft and dishonest graft. There's all the difference in the world between the two. Yes, many of our men have grown rich in politics. I have myself. I've made a big fortune out of the game, and I'm getting richer every day. But I've not gone in some dishonest graft, blackmailing gamblers, saloon keepers, disorderly people, and neither has any of the men who have made big fortunes in politics. There's an honest graft, and I'm an example of how it works. I might sum up the whole thing by saying, I had seen my opportunities, and I took them. Just let me explain my examples. My party's in power in the city, and it's going to undertake a lot of public improvements. Well, I'm tipped off, say, that they're going to lay out a new park at a certain place. I see my opportunity, and I take it. I go to that place, and I buy up all the land I can in the neighborhood. Then the board of this or that makes its plan public, and there's a rush to get my land, which nobody cared particular for before. Ain't it perfectly honest to charge a good price and make a profit on my investment and foresight? Of course it is. Well, that's honest graft. Or supposing it's a new bridge they're going to build. I get tipped off and I buy as much property as I can that has been taken for approaches. I sell at my own price later on and drop some more money in the bank. Wouldn't you? It's just like looking ahead in Wall Street or in the coffee or cotton market. It's honest graft, and I'm looking for it every day of the year. I will tell you frankly that I've got a good lot of it too. I'll tell you of one case. They were going to fix up a big park, no matter where. I got onto it and went looking around for land in that neighborhood. I could have get nothing at a bargain but a big piece of swamp, but I took it fast enough and held onto it. What turned out was just that I counted on. They couldn't make the park complete without Plunkett's swamp. and they had to pay a good price for it.
Mm-hmm.
Anything dishonest in that? Up in the watershed, I made my money too. I bought up several bits of land there some years ago and made a pretty good guess that they would be bought up for water purposes later by the city.
Okay.
Somehow I always guessed about right. And shouldn't I be enjoying the profit of my foresight? It was rather amusing when the condemnation commissioners came along and found piece after piece of the land in the name of George Plunkett of the 5th Assembly District, New York City. They wondered how I knew just what to buy. The answer is I see my opportunity and I took it. I haven't confined myself to land. Anything that pays is in my line. I told you how I got rich by honest graft. Now, let me tell you that most politicians who are accused of robbing the city get rich the same way. They didn't steal a dollar from the city treasury. They just seen their opportunities and took them. That is why when a reform administration comes in and spends $500,000 in trying to find the public robberies they talked about in the campaign, they don't find them. The books are always all right. So I'm rereading this for myself too, because this is exactly how New York politics works. There's no really any crimes being committed.
Mm-hmm.
But Como and the current governor and then the rest, they're just good opportunists, just like any good capitalist, and they operate like capitalists, and they really, that's why they're not ever punished or objected to, by anyone but good government busybodies.
Yeah, it's like how Nancy Pelosi's husband somehow tends to beat the market more often than the highest paid financial investors. Just coincidence.
Yeah, so he repeats the line that he's doing nothing different than any Wall Street trader, which he's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
But it's reading this that I'm like, there's really no liberal reformism that's going to tackle this, because he's right. He's acting like any capitalist, and this
being an opportunist
sparks in me an anti-capitalist settlement that just didn't go away. That's the ABC of politics. It ain't easy work to get up to Y and Z. You have to give nearly all your time and attention to it. Of course, you may have some business or occupation on the side, but the great business of your life must be politics if you want to succeed in it. A few years ago, Tammany tried to mix politics and business in equal quantities by having 2 leaders for each district, a politician and a businessman. They wouldn't mix. They were like oil and water. The politician looked after the politics in his district. The businessman looked after his grocery store or his milk route. And whenever he appeared at an executive meeting, it was only to make trouble. The whole scheme turned out to be a farce and was abandoned mighty quick. Do you understand now why it is that a reformer goes down and out in the first or second round, while a politician answers to the gong every time? It is because the one has gone into the fight without training, while the other trains all the time and knows every fine point of the game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's biting.
Yes.
So, on to something that can really make our blood boil, labor issues.
Oh, boy.
Okay, same era, but pretty much picking up where we left off in 1905. This is the same year of Mr. Honest Graft. The New York legislature, love them, had passed a law providing that no bakery could employ anyone to work more than how much time do you think they limited? Take a guess.
Oh, I have no idea.
1905. What was the limit on how long you could work in a bakery?
100 hours. I really don't know.
Okay, that's they limited it to 60 hours.
60 hours. Okay.
And no more than 10 hours a day. Working a 6-day week.
Wow.
Because you didn't have the full weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Lochner had been convicted for a violation, and the case was brought to the Supreme Court. Speaking for a 5-4 majority, Justice Rufus Peckham handed down a decision invalidating the New York law on the strength of a rigidly conservative interpretation of liberty of contract. It's always that liberty of contract. He ruled that it comes up in only libertarians really argue about freedom of contract, but really it's ingrained in all liberalism. and neoliberalism. He ruled that, well, I guess not neoliberalism, because like they'll regulate businesses, but just completely. Oh, James guessed 40. Sir, 40 is what we have now. Yeah. No shame. So he ruled that the act exceeded the police power of the state, i.e., the power to protect health and welfare, and that it interfered with the freedom of contract protected by the 14th Amendment.
Sure.
Limiting hours has nothing to do with health. So
Right.
it goes through all of
Right.
that. Bunch of lies, complete, obfuscate, what, I don't know what's really going on here. There's no problem. So anyway, let's move on to it's no longer Harland anymore, but Harlan had not left the Supreme Court, by the way, by this time, but instead this is Oliver Holmes' dissenting opinion. The four minority justices in this case wrote two dissents. Harlan, with the concurrence with Justices White and Day, did not quarrel with the fundamental conceptions of the majority decision, but argued that long hours of work in bake shops are, in fact, not good for your health, and also maintained that the statute was not palpably inconsistent with the Constitution. Holmes' lone dissent, which had a more fundamental quarrel with the majority, is remembered as one of his most famous. It argues powerfully for judicial restraint and urges judges to set aside their own prejudices when deciding on the validity of laws. Quote, "The accident of our finding certain opinions natural and familiar or novel and even shocking ought not to conclude our judgment upon the question whether statutes embodying them conflict with the Constitution." Holmes' argument had a profound effect on later jurisprudence. Because, the majority opinions all like, it just doesn't seem right. It's like, contract law is just so natural. We don't want to interfere with that.
Getting into the natural law. Jeez.
So this case is decided upon economic theory, which a large part of the country does not entertain. If it were a question whether I agreed with that theory, I should desire to study it further and long before making up my mind. But I do not conceive that to be my duty, because I strongly believe that my agreement or disagreement has nothing to do with the right of a majority to embody their opinions in law. It is settled by various decisions of this court that state constitutions and state laws may regulate life in many ways, which we as legislators might think is just injustice, or if you like, as tyrannical as this, and which equally with this interfere with the liberty to contract. Sunday laws and usury laws are ancient examples. A more modern one is the prohibition of lotteries. The liberty of the citizen to do as he likes, so long as he does not interfere with the liberty of others to do the same, which has been a shibboleth for some well-known writers, is interfered with by school laws, by the post office, by every state or municipal institution that takes his money for purposes thought desirable, whether he likes it or not. The 14th Amendment does not enact Mr. Herbert Spencer's social status. The United States and state statutes and decisions cutting down the liberty to contract by way of combination are familiar to this court. Some of these laws embody convictions or, and so on and so on. Next, 1908, Mueller v. Oregon. In this case, the court showed far greater respect for social legislation than in Lochner v. New York. Oregon had imposed a maximum of 10 hours a day for women in factories and laundries. Louis Brandeis, arguing for the constitutionality of the law, presented an impressive revolutionary brief in which the legal argument itself was dwarfed by a massive testimony from a variety of sources directed to the facts and not the law. Brandeis was trying to establish beyond doubt that so in this case, they upheld the labor law, but mostly because it was for the women, the females. Well, let's go on. Brandeis was trying to establish beyond doubt that long hours of work were in fact harmful to the health and morals of women, and the reference of Justice David Burrell to his, quote, very copious collection of these matters pays tribute to Brandeis's brief. The scope of this decision was limited, for it applies specifically to women, and Lochner v. New York was not overruled, but it gave hope to the proponents of social legislation and evidence to the country that the court was not as rigid as it had seemed 3 years before when it decided the Lochner case. 9 years later, in Bunting v. Oregon, the court went still further and sustained a law that required, with some qualifications for overtime pay, that no person of either sex should be employed in a factory or mill more than 10 hours a day. So it goes on. So there's a few pages of that.
Mm-hmm.
So the rest of this section is about railroad reform. Moving forward to just a few more. Yeah, two more. Okay.
Okay.
And these have to do back to interstate commerce, because now we're talking about railroads. Hammer v. Dagenhart, 1918. This decision blocked the development of social legislation for many years, and thus created the era of good feelings. Not era of good feelings, normalcy, a return to normalcy. State-by-state regulation of child. Okay. Oh God, you ready to be outraged?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
This one is about child labor.
Oh.
The at the time, right to work.
Mm-hmm.
State-by-state regulation of child labor was irregular and ineffective, especially in those states which are trying to lure employers with a cheap labor supply.
Kind of sounds like the same race to the bottom that right to work states have now.
And by the way, right to work was just kind of starting up when I was reading this. So it's like reading shit like this was like a blow to the head, epiphany-wise, of just like, wow, it's not different. And by that, the issues are different. We've made progress, but I mean, the dynamics of capitalism haven't changed in American politics. That's the thing to recognize, to me. So, in 1916, therefore, Congress took over. It passed an act prohibiting interstate or foreign shipment of commodities produced in factories employing children under 14 and in mines of children under 16. Dagenhart, who had two sons working in a North Carolina cotton mill, challenged the constitutionality of the act. Because you can only do this because, it's my kids. It's not someone else's kids. It's my kids, and they should have work experience, right?
Yeah, right.
Like conservatives argue about with kids and work.
Gonna get soft otherwise.
Teenagers and jobs. Yeah. So, or because there are exceptions for your kids can work when it's your business, but there's got to be a lot of rules involved.
Yeah.
Because it's just assumed you love your kid and you're not abusing them, but I guess that's what inspections for, or CPS. Supposedly, yes. So the issue before the court was whether the power of Congress to regulate commerce embraced the power to prohibit commerce in articles produced under conditions of which Congress disapproved. Justice William Day, in deciding that it did not, spoke for a court that was divided 5-4. The decision remained intensely controversial for many years. So again, it goes into the stickiness of what does intercourse and traffic mean? Over interstate transportation. Sorry, I skipped. Let's see if there's an. It just said, it exceeds constitutional authority of Congress, because it's. Let's see. That there should be limitations upon the right to employ children in mines and factories in the interest of their own and the public welfare, all will admit. That such employment is generally deemed to require regulation is shown by the fact that the brief of counsel states that every state in the Union has a law upon the subject, limiting the right to thus employ children. In North Carolina, the state wherein is located the factory in which the employment was had in the present case, no child under 12 of age is permitted to work. Oh, golly gee. It may be desirable that such laws be uniform, but our federal government is one of the enumerated powers. To sustain this statute would not be, in our judgment, a recognition of the lawful exertion of congressional authority over interstate commerce, but would sanction an invasion by the federal power of the control of a matter purely local in its character, and over which no authority has been delegated to Congress in conferring the power. So once again, it's just this is a states' rights issue. It's the same argument the court just made with Roe v. Wade.
Yep.
Although we haven't given what is the name of the decision though, like of the case? We keep calling it like the ending of Roe v. Wade case.
I don't know what the particular
It must
case
have
that
its
came
own
up.
name, right? Like,
Yeah. I mean, you think there
United-
would be a test case that would come up.
Yeah, we need to name the enemy.
I'll take a look here.
Well, I mean, it is a test case basically, but we've had such test cases over our lifetimes with heartbeat bills and a lot of other things. Which is why I'm not really surprised it's gone this way or it's gone this far. You know, it's like, but and Democrats were right to say, you know, it's in danger, but they weren't doing anything except fundraising off of it. Except in states like New York where we do have abortion protections. But again, what is abortion access when it's only in 8 states? And
Right.
how does that, like, this is a really dumb meme. Have you seen it yet where it's like corporations are saying they'll pay for the travel expenses of
I've
their
seen that, yeah.
employees? God, what bullshit. God, what fucking bullshit. These are the parties that are funding all these conservatives.
True.
Because they protect their status and their preferred, the favoritism of property. Meanwhile, like, yeah, our serfs are going to be taken care of. So it's just, if anything, it's a advertisement to come work for Amazon or whatever company. So here is, again, Oliver Holmes' dissenting opinion in Hammer v. Dagenhart. The tone of this dissent, with which Justices McKenna, Brandeis, and Clark concurred, indicates the outrage Holmes felt at the court's excessively sweeping assertion of its power in this case. The minority justices felt that this case was the same in principle as those where the prohibition by Congress of the interstate movement of lottery tickets had been upheld, and those of which bans on the interstate movement of women for moral purposes, of liquor, and of adulterated food. Notice how women are themselves put in the category of liquor and lottery tickets.
Ew. Yeah, I'm sure that's not coincidental either.
No. That's why
I'm sure they all. Yeah, right. I'm sure.
But it's interesting that in the past, like in the Gilded Age, there was this big problem with using lottery tickets being, like, I guess it was interstate lotteries or something. And that was like a problem. It was a corruption problem maybe, or something to look into, I guess. But it's just one of those, like, you know, small details. So, the court had upheld these laws. They were aware that this decision not only crippled efforts to eliminate child labor, but created a legal no man's land. The states could not legally exclude products made in other states, for that usurped the power belonging to Congress. And yet Congress could not forbid the interstate shipment of goods made by child labor, for that usurped a power belonging to the states. A legal paradox, which we still have many. And we're going to come up again with such paradoxes when it comes to women
so many things
paying for a woman's travel expenses to get an abortion.
That's true.
Just as we had the Hobby Lobby case, ensuring that corporations don't have to pay for women's reproductive health care.
Yeah.
Based on the ACA, or just paying Medicaid taxes, I guess. But it was no. It was in providing health insurance. It's still, they're providing private health insurance.
Yeah, but that didn't have to be.
Yeah.
Didn't have to include that. Yeah.
Yeah. The court vindicated So the court vindicated Holmes and his fellow dissenters by explicitly overruling Hammer v. Dagenham in a case involving the constitutionality of the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. But that was when the court was packed and you had the New Deal movement effect. In the Darby case, the court, speaking through Justice Harlan Fiske Stone, declared Hammer v. Dagenham has not been followed. Hammer v. Dagenham was a departure from the principles which have prevailed in the interpretation of the Commerce Clause both before and since the decision, and such vitality as a precedent as it has had as long since been exhausted. It should be, and now is, overruled. Okay. So I said two more. Sorry, one more.
No problem.
This one is not labor related. It is speech related.
Conservatives' favorite talking point.
Yes, Abrams v. U.S. in 1919. Maybe we've heard of this one.
It sounds a little bit familiar.
It's not up front though. So this case involved the Espionage Act of 1918. Abrams and 4 other plaintiffs had been convicted for distributing leaflets attacking the United States and her allies for specifically intervening against the Bolsheviks in Russia. Conviction was upheld for reasons stated here by Justice John Clark. The differences of opinion within the court were clearly stated by both sides, the majority and the minorities in the famous Holmes dissent. So there's some paragraphs that are kind of fun to read. All of the 5 defendants were born in Russia. They were intelligent, had considerable schooling, and at the time they were arrested, they had lived in the U.S. By the way, I'm reading like the majority opinion reads like a conservative commentator, demagogue, like Ben Shapiro. Right. Saying like, look, they're not even Americans; they're Russians, and they're well educated. They're not working class. But it goes on
somehow.
And again, all of this could have been made up. All of it could be completely made up because the minority opinion paints a different story. So anyway, they had lived in the U.S. terms varying from 5 to 10 years, but none of them had applied for naturalization. 4 of them testified as witnesses on their own behalf, and of these, 3 frankly avowed that they were rebels, revolutionists, anarchists, and they did not believe in government in any form, and they declared that they had no interest whatsoever in the government of the U.S. The 4th defendant testified that he was a socialist and believed in a, quote, proper kind of government, not capitalistic, but in a classification, the government of the United States was capitalistic.
Yep.
It was admitted on this trial that the defendants had united to print and distribute the described circulars, and that 5,000 of them had been printed and distributed on the 22nd day of August, 1918. The group had a defendant, Abrams, under one assumed name, and there the subject of printing the circulars was discussed, and 2 weeks before, they conspired to do it. The defendants pleaded not guilty, and the case of the government consisted in showing the facts we have stated and introducing in evidence, basically just saying, in a sheet entitled Revolutionists Unite for Action, written by the defendant Lipton, and found on him when he was arrested in another paper found at the headquarters of the group, and just outlines the evidence. It will not do to say, as it is now argued, that the only intent of the defendants was to prevent injury to the Russian cause. Men must have held to have intended and to be accounted for the effects which their acts were likely to produce. Even if their primary purpose and intent was to aid the cause of the Russian Revolution, the plan of action which they adopted necessarily involved, before it could be realized, defeat of the war program of the United States. For the obvious effect of this appeal, because we had troops in Russia at the time, not the aid government loans, and not to work in ammunition factories where their work would produce bullets, bayonets, cannon, and other munitions of war, the use of which could cause the murder of Germans and Russians. That the interpretation we have put upon these articles circulated in the greatest part of our land from which great numbers of soldiers were at the time taking ship daily, and in which great quantities of war supplies of every kind were at the time being manufactured for transportation overseas, is not only the fair interpretation of, just saying, like, they're stirring up trouble, and it's trouble. So anyway, the dissent. This opinion, in which Justice Brandeis concurred, was perhaps the greatest written by the great dissenter. It has become famous for its plea for free trade in ideas. So this is where we get the foundation of the marketplace of ideas, as opposed to the majority opinion, which is, well, of course we can regulate speech. It was, anti-government. It was, it's going to be harmful, and that's why the espionage, it falls under the Espionage Act. But instead, we get this dissent. The dissent lays down the plea for free trade in ideas and for its assertion that, quote, the best test of truth is the power of the thought to get itself accepted in the competition of the market. I hope that we have heard the last, or nearly the last, of the Espionage Act cases, wrote Holmes at the time of his English friend, Sir Frederick Pollock. Some of our subordinate judges seem to me to have been hysterical during the war. Holmes' view that the expression of opinion should be left free unless they are so immediately threaten immediate interference with the lawful and pressing purposes of the law, that an immediate check is required to save the country, usually referred to as having a clear and present danger.
I see.
Which has been the subject of much later judicial qualification and has not always been followed. The court departed nobly from this principle in a majority case involving communists after World War II, which was the Dennis case of 1951. So that is the rest of the book has this section. I'm not sure if it has any other court cases. If it does, they're post-war. But otherwise, that is it. So, any thoughts beyond that?
Oh, I'm curious. First and foremost, how did you come across this book? Is this just something you've had on the shelf for a while and you just pull it out when necessary?
Shit. I think I picked it up. I was, like you do when you're in college in Manhattan, I went to a used bookstore on the Upper West Side, and I got a copy of Plato's Republic, and I think I got one of the volumes of this.
Okay.
If it wasn't there, it was at a library sale of some kind.
Sure.
And it was one of the volumes. Maybe, I think it was volume 3 here. Maybe, yeah, it must have been this one. And I was just blown away by like this collection. And so I went out of my way to order on Amazon when I still used it, the first part 1 and 2. Because part 1 is Columbus to the Revolutionary War. And it has all the primary documents that are pretty much not covered in any standard U.S. education unless you're in the college 301 level, of all of the different legal things and speeches and revolts and things that happened over 200 years that lay the foundation of American politics.
Oh, wow.
Really, like, just how
Just
how the 1718 project is
the 1619 project?
Yeah, 1619. Yeah. But also related in that same field is pointing out that Bacon's rebellion in Virginia in the colonial era was where you first get this distinction between like separating white workers and black workers.
Yep.
And so the documents in that book cover that, and this book kind of covers it. Oh, that's interesting, right? So this book ends in 1981. It ends with Reagan being elected. And with Jimmy Carter, and I don't think it doesn't. Oh no, it's just Ronald Reagan arms control negotiations. It's on the start. But yeah, and but in the Reconstruction part of it, which It's the report on joint. There's actually a speech here I'd really like to. Let's see. Is this? Yeah. This is a short one, so I think you'll like it. Document 6 in the Reconstruction section. An address to the loyal citizens and Congress of the United States of America, August 1865. During 1865 and 66, blacks in a number of southern cities held conventions in which they discussed their problems and formulated appeals for support, protection for the people of the nation. This address was adopted by a convention held in Alexandria, Virginia, August 2nd to 5th, 65. We, the undersigned members of the Convention of Colored Citizens of the State of Virginia, would respectfully represent. And by the way, this is the speech in this appeal is basically you need to kill the war criminals now. Don't why don't we appeal to you to not pardon the Confederate, which was happening. So, sorry, the intro didn't really set that up, but it becomes clear later. We would respectfully represent that although we have been held as slaves and denied all recognition as a constituent of your nationality for almost the entire period of the duration of your government, and that by your permission we have been denied either home or country and derived of the dearest rights of human nature, yet when you and our immediate oppressors met in deadly conflict upon the field of battle, the one to destroy and the other to save your government and nationality, we, with scarce an exception in our utmost souls, espoused your cause and watched and prayed and waited and labored for your success. When the contest waxed long and the result hung doubtfully, you appealed to us for help. And how well we answered is written in the rosters of the 200,000 colored troops now enrolled in your service. And as to our undying devotion to your cause, let the uniform acclamation of escaped prisoners, quote, whenever we saw a black face, we felt sure of a friend. Well, the war is over. The rebellion is put down, and we are declared free. 4/5 of our enemies are paroled or amnestied, and the other fifth are being pardoned. And the president has, in his efforts of the reconstruction of the civil government of the states, late in rebellion, left us entirely at the mercy of these subjugated but unconverted rebels in everything save the privilege of bringing us our wives, our little ones, to the auction block. We know these men, know them well, and we assure you that with the majority of them, loyalty is only lip deep, and that their professions of loyalty are used as a cover to the cherished design of getting restored to their former relations with the federal government, and then by all sorts of unfriendly legislation to render the freedom you have given us more intolerable than the slavery they intended for us. We warn you in time that our only safety is in keeping them under governors of the military persuasion until you have so amended the federal constitution that it will prohibit the states from making any distinction between citizens on account of race or color. In one word, the only salvation for us besides the power of the government is in the possession of the ballot. Give us this, and we will protect ourselves. But 'tis said we are ignorant, admit it, yet who denies we know a traitor from a loyal man, a gentleman from a rowdy, a friend from an enemy? The 12,000 colored votes of the state of New York sent Governor Seymour home and Reuben Fenton to Albany. Did not they know who to vote for? All we ask is an equal chance with the white traitors varnished in Japan with the oath of amnesty. Can you deny us this and still keep faith with us? We are sheep in the midst of wolves, and nothing but the military arm of the government prevents us and all the truly loyal white men from being driven from the land of our birth. Do not then, we beseech you, give to one of these wayward sisters the rights they abandoned and forfeited when they rebelled until you have secured our rights by the aforementioned amendment to the Constitution. Trusting that you will not be deaf to the appeal therein made, or unmindful to the warnings which the malignity of the rebels are consistently giving you, and that you will rise to the height of being just for the sake of justice, remain yours for our flag, our country, and humanity.
Wow. That's a speech.
It's not even a speech; it's an address. It's written out.
Yeah.
But that hits hard, right?
Yeah. I mean, that gets right to it, and it raises a lot of good points. And perhaps you know more about the aftermath and Reconstruction stuff like that, but it does seem like they capitulated quite a bit to the former slave owners.
In every way.
Giving them reparations.
Yeah.
In some cases, taking back the reparations they had given to the freed slaves and giving them back to their former masters. I mean, allowing sharecropping to continue on, like many ways.
Yeah, it's odd that so many in the North see they oppose slavery on moral grounds, and that's the problem when you oppose something on moral grounds and not economic. Because if you oppose it on economic grounds, like I don't want to have to compete my labor with the slaves, that would also apply to a underpaid black person, as it always has, or a immigrant, illegal immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
But that's such a bigger problem or a bigger issue to tackle, which because then you're getting you're undermining capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a matter of changing the station of one group of people.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's very true, and slavery is an economic system. It was practiced by so-called capitalists, but it's a different form than.
Yeah, given sense. No, yeah, he was talking about the vote, Freddie. Yeah, so yeah, because they did. It wasn't naive, of course, to just think like they get the 15th Amendment or the 14th. That no, Congress shall make no law abridging rights based on race.
Right.
But of course, the Supreme Court works within that framework to undermine all of that.
That I just cannot understand.
So it goes to how the vote isn't enough, and getting constitutional amendments isn't enough, and it's sort of maybe why even the most radical activists aren't, we need to change the Constitution because it's just so insurmountable with how politics works.
Yeah, because and that's the thing. I was listening to a podcast the other day. If I can think of the name of it, I'll post it in the chat. But they were making the point was that every time there's a Supreme Court seat that's vacated, the party that's in charge will make this big showing of how their nominee is non-political. They're just going to interpret the Constitution the way it was written and all this stuff. And the other party will be like, oh, this is a political choice. This is a political choice. And yet, when it comes to presidential elections, everyone is like, you have to vote for our candidate because they could appoint Supreme Court justices. And yet, there's
Democrats act like it's no big deal. There's nothing partisan about it.
Yeah, right.
It's lip service.
But like, why do you have to have your guy appointing the justice if it's nonpartisan, if it's not political? So
there's always the paradoxes of like what your messaging will be to your people, people on your side versus the independents or the rest of the country. There's inter-party arguments for supporting Hillary Clinton, and then there's the arguments you're supposed to give to everyone else. And I think there's this feeling or a habit of thinking that one speech you're putting out online is private and among one circle, and that's separate from the speech or outreach or propaganda you're putting out for everyone.
Sure.
And something we can be better at, be better than them, and not be hypocrites, is just have the same messaging no matter what level we're talking to. If we're talking to other leftists, if we're talking, but the thing is, this really confuses people, and then that's like if we go into videos with the Jimmy Dore video I have.
Yeah, I kind of like to start with that.
And we'll get into some of those habits where Jimmy Dore goes reactionary simply because he can't understand that a leftist would be consistent in who he wants to talk to or outreach to. That he has outreach for a specific kind of people and not that he's trying to outreach everybody. Because in a partisan's eyes, there are people you just can't work with. Not only because of something you disagree with, which is where it gets really surface level. Oh, you can't work with people you disagree with. No. It's not a matter of disagreeing about some issues. It's about to work with people, you need to be able to be using the same tactics, have the same strategy. And when it comes down to it, people who say like their vision of fighting the power is just protesting,
right,
and not union organizing.
Yeah.
And we can't work with them because they just want to protest, or they think overturning the government is doing January 6th, but like more complete or something. While, say this Tanky said, our strategy is union organizing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can't work with Boogaloo Boys because they're not union organizing. They're not unionists. So our political strategy is based around unionizing. It's not even party building, really. It's unionizing. It's striking. It's labor power. And reactionary politics is individualized. It has nothing to do with collective action. It doesn't even imagine collective action. It's just a group of individuals that are aggrieved and struggling. So if you want to get into that, Pollock, so hopefully,
sure. Yeah. If you want to bring it up, that's fine.
Yeah. Let's see. So I'll do screen share.
So the podcast, I found it now, is citations needed, and the episode is called "The Manufactured Mystique of the Supreme Court," and I'll link it in the chat there.
So this is kind of long, but I can skip around. Let me know Let me know when it's actually visible. All right, is the Jimmy Dore video visible?
Nope. Are you doing the share screen?
I think I am. Oh, allow. There we go.
There we go.
Okay.
I'll let that up there then.
If I can fix that, make it full screen. Okay.
Perfect.
So,
if you could turn on closed captions for that, please.
Oh, yeah. That'll help. Do you really want... Okay. So, I'll try to skip all the times that Jimmy stops to just rant and repeat himself, because it gets a little meta where it's not just his interview with someone from World Socialist News, but his commentary on it. But I think it's helpful in some ways because it shows that even in retrospect, it's not the heat of the moment. He's still like a reactionary asshole. But anyway, so first he opens with showing a speech by the Boogaloo Boy that he interviews and falls.
Sure. I'm not hearing any sound.
Are you not getting sound?
Not getting sound coming through.
Oh, damn.
There may be a box you have to check or something.
Yeah, let's see what I need to do.
Especially if you're doing full screen, then you have to check a box.
Oh, do you know where that is?
Should be able to just do it.
Settings, audio.
No, it's not. It's not under the audio. It would be under the share screen. You probably have to unshare it and then try resharing again, and just make sure that box is checked.
Wow. All right, we could try again, though I didn't do anything differently.
So it's probably... Yeah, still not getting it.
Did you just hear it now?
No, not hearing. So it should come right up when you do the share screen.
Tell you what, would it help if you brought it up?
Yeah, if you want to just link it in our private chat here, I can
Yeah.
I can just pull the URL.
That'll be take a step out of it.
All right.
So this was January of last year, and when it was more Twitter left that was just like trying to cancel Dore because he would be promoting the Boogaloo Boy, and they were ignoring something I thought was pretty important, which was he would interview the Boogaloo Boy, and then he interviewed an actual trot,
Mhm.
and be really generous to the Boogaloo Boy because he's on this kick of left right unite politics, which when you examine enough doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And what have you. It's kind of why Nader isn't really the political force he is that he was in the 90s.
Yeah.
When there was a Reform Party that was doing pretty well, actually.
Yeah, Jimmy just kind of seems to, whoever likes him and treats him well, he's going to be nice to them, and
right. And anyone who pushes back on what he's saying,
yeah, they're the worst reactionary CIA plant that's ever existed.
Yeah, he's actually going to like say like he does this odd thing where then he like kind of suggests they're dividing the left. They must be on purpose, right? I don't understand it because I'm just a jerk off. But anyway, this was the point. It was this video in particular that I just kind of lost any kind of loyalty or brownie points that he had gained with me, as he was one of the few leftists with a platform, well, not leftists, but commentators with a platform that would interview Greens.
Right. He used to bring on a lot of cool people.
Usually just the ones that ran in his area, like in LA. But he would interview. He was. I think he was the only person I was aware of in any left tube that actually interviewed Hawkins. It was only for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and it was way more critical than the last time that he interviewed him or Deadly Jill, because he'd had it, I guess, with sectarian leftists, I guess.
Yeah.
Who want our own independent party and not like, because he had put in his social capital with the Movement for a People's Party, and that's been a complete wreck. So
yeah,
he's more cynical and aimless as ever, like many others too. But everyone seems to be relying and falling back on a just labor strategy, just talking labor strategy.
Yeah, it's not a bad strategy, really.
No, it isn't.
All right, well, let's get into the video here.
Yesterday, we interviewed this guy who, on the inaugural day, went to the capital of Michigan and gave this very brief speech. So let's listen to it.
BLM, Antifa, Boogaloo, and right-wing militias.
He says BLM, Antifa, and right-wing militias.
They are the antibodies, not the disease that is destroying our country. The disease is a country run by two corrupt political parties that do not care about you. So deeply incestuous with corporations that they are indistinguishable from each other. A government that spent 6 months debating whether to give their own people $600, but only 24 hours to unanimously agree to give billions of dollars to foreign tyrannical governments and corporations. A government that has bombed villages overseas my entire life for my supposed safety here. This is a call for unity. For all of American people that realize the true threat against us to come together. For every mother mourning her children that was killed by police, for every business crushed down by state lockdowns, for every broken soldier sent to fight wars that have no point. This is our last chance to avoid either a tyrannical government or a bloody and pointless civil war among American people who do not have that much against each other and have more in common than they realize. And a message to the government: we come in peace. We do not intend to commit violence, but I am pleading with you, with tears in my eyes and cracks in my voice. If you continue to oppress the American people, they will remain rational no longer. Thank you.
Of course, what does that mean? We're going to be nonviolent, but I'm going to make an empty threat.
Yeah, like followed up with a threat.
I hate that. I hate that. And even radicals, even lefty radicals do this, and I don't like it when they do. If you're going to say, you know, we're going to riot, we're going to break property, then you better be doing that, either or someone who has done it, you know, and that's only black blockers. So I believe them when they say that. I don't believe anybody else, and I don't like it when people lie when they grandstand. Okay.
But what a mishmash of beliefs. I have such a difficulty in trying to pinpoint what is the ideological center of a movement like the Boogaloo Boys. Like,
but here's where Dore loves it. And throughout this video, it's 40 minutes. We definitely need to skip around, especially
sure.
You'll notice when he repeats himself and when he's just going on, you know, tangents.
Sure.
No, but I just want to state that the Dore loves it and takes this guy at his word.
Of course.
The entire time.
Of course.
So when he says, like, he brunches BLM and right-wing militias together as in the same group, Dore likes that because it's fitting his bias. And
that's the thing about him. It's just like,
and it's just a total mistake. No BLM activists, you know, if you talk to them, they will say, no, these guys are antagonistic. They're enemies.
Reactionaries. Yeah.
And Dore does not care. He doesn't listen to them. He doesn't hear them. Because they can literally be talking to him, and he'll be nodding in one video in agreement, and then in the next, he'll be praising, you know, right wingers who just talk of uniting with the work, you know, with people. And then we'll get into that, and that's why I think this video is really good, and why I saved it, because it's hitting that problem over and over again.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. He's so uncritical of any right-wing talking point that gets fed to him. He doesn't do the research at all, and someone just says, you know, they're putting microchips in the vaccine. He'd be like, oh, that's terrible. I hadn't heard of that before, and just he's got nothing to push back against it, so he just like accepts it.
But
when it comes to leftists,
he needs a pre-existing bias to counter certain bullshit. So he's limited by his own experiences, which most of us are.
But he doesn't do the work either. Like,
right, and that's the problem. He should be better than that. He shouldn't. Right. Should be better.
I mean, he always tries to play it off like, well, I'm just a stupid comedian on the internet. I just got a YouTube
I'm a jack off in my garage.
I'm a jack off in my garage. But yeah.
His garage, which is a very nice studio setup and whatever.
But he also then does things like thinks he can do an entire, you know, the People's Party movement or force the vote. If you think you have the influence to start these mass movements, and yet no one should take you seriously, pick a lane, you know.
It was so pathetic when he was doing that, and the fact that you had enough people who were. And so the thing is, I don't like. It made me feel off because I didn't really disagree with the premise that the squad isn't doing enough, or that DSA
they certainly could do more.
DSA politics isn't, you know, up to the task of system change, let's say, or even reform. But that's not what was being talked about. It all just gets boiled down to congressional practice, which the Sam Cedars are always going to win that, because if anything, they just have to argue, like Hobbes, that things work the way they work, and they work backwards from that.
Very much. All right. Well, let's get back into.
There's a lot here.
Sure.
That guy looked like a right-wing militia guy to me, even though I noticed he was wearing the rainbow flag for the LGBT, and he was talking about unity with Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And I was like, who's that guy? And what does that remind me of? That reminds me of Fred Hampton. That reminds me of 1969 when Black Panthers aligned with Confederate flag-wielding working-class whites. What? Ethnic and racial groups each created their own social services and activist networks to combat every kind of oppression. One was the Young Patriot Organization, the YPO, which was based in hillbilly Harlem, an uptown neighborhood of Chicago, populated by displaced white Southerners. So poor white people from the South came to Chicago. They were also treated horribly. Many YPO members flaunted racist, controversial symbols associated with Southern pride, such as the Confederate flag. But like blacks and Latinos, the white young patriots and their families experienced discrimination in Chicago too. In their case, it was because they were poor and from the South. You see this? Black Panthers, Confederate flag. Do you see this? Do you see this?
Yeah, I see Jill Stein sitting with Putin. It must mean the Greens are Russian agents.
Yeah, guilt by association only works when it's Jimmy's enemies. Otherwise,
Now-
it's
Well, by the way, he wasn't a Russiagator, of course, but he was one of the few voices that was like not for Russiagate, and that's why I would say Jimmy Dore isn't that bad. I mean, he's
right.
he's reactionary for the most part, but he's not.
Well,
He's
yeah.
reacting against status quo overall, but
Mhm.
anyway. But I want to make the joke that when I want Black Panther Party analysis, I go to the conversation.
Yeah, right. Not just a picture.
That's where I go. No, I mean like the site he's reading off of. It's not exactly.
Oh, sure.
It's not
You're saying
exactly-
the site, the conversation.
Not exactly what I consider to be robust analysis of Panther Party politics.
I'm not
Because
even
now
familiar
I'm
with
not
it.
equipped to debunk, what the argument is. But I know that there are many podcasters and YouTube channels. This is Revolution, I think, is one where you'll hear from veteran Panther Party people on how this is bullshit.
Yeah.
This is not what it was about.
No.
I think they were doing maybe one issue campaign. It wasn't uniting for the struggle.
No. I think more than anything, Fred Hampton was trying to just build class solidarity and be like, guys, stop doing these stupid things. We have much more in common than these arbitrary things that are dividing us. So we should join together against the ruling class. Not, hey, we accept all your dumbass ideas. Just come be a part of our movement.
And he was only doing it for like 5 years because he was a really
it was not
guy.
the whole thing anyway. Sure.
So it's not like it would be nice if you had a similar person with a much longer career, and that's why I listen to the opinions and analysis of veteran, like the boomer Panthers. They're old, they're academics.
Been in it for a long time. Yeah.
They survived. They weren't locked
right.
up.
Right.
So that's why they're more academic types and not the boots on the ground types. But they have things to say about how things worked back then. So I defer to them to debunk their shit.
But yeah. All right. Well, let's continue on here.
Eventually, young patriots rejected their deeply embedded ideas of white supremacy. What? Eventually, young patriots rejected their deeply embedded ideas of white supremacy.
So sure, it's a good idea to try to get racist movements to stop being racist. De-radicalization is a noble and very difficult cause, but I mean, just by combining your efforts, well, by default, they're going to stop being racist. That's a bit of a stretch. You have to do it strategically, So.
And this is all set up, so we can skip ahead. I think this is
sure
to skip ahead.
And even drop this gentleman. He's supposed to be a socialist.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Here.
From the world social takeover of our country.
Okay.
Whatever.
And so I brought on this guy. He's supposed to be.
Is this the part you wanted to skip to?
Sort of. I mean, obviously, there's different areas to skip, but this is the intro, so he talks.
A socialist from the World Socialist website because they were covering a strike. He was brought on to talk about a strike that they were covering. And that guy sounded, you're going to hear what he sounds like, and it's horrible. Now, I think they do a lot of great work over at the World Socialist.
What was that?
Totally not poisoning the well.
No, not at all. He hasn't said a word yet on the screen, but he'll give 5 uninterrupted minutes for the Boogaloo Boy to say stuff before he chimes in.
Now, keep in mind, at the time, I did, in fact, watch or listen to both interviews, or at least this one, because I was actually curious. Because it was, again, Dore actually interviews a real leftist. I like that. And I listened. But I was disappointed, shocked a little, but just angered even, that Dore was just completely hostile to him the whole time. because he dared go against his narratives. As long as you talk to Dore's narratives, if he likes you, he'll have you on again. It's why he probably doesn't have Howie on, because Howie was not for, what the fuck was it? Was it about Syria? It was probably about Syria, because he and the Greens, we just took a position of non-interference, I think, and or something of that nature. And we were stuck between like an anti-imperialist position and we got to help Rojava position type of thing. But helping Rojava was the Air Force bombing Syria. So it's a rock hard place with that, where we don't want U.S. intervention, but intervention does help Rojava. But I think we argued like it only helps Rojava in the short term. As soon as we're not bombing the fuck out of Syria, what then? But anyway, but Dore was hostile to Howie when he had him on for when he was running for president over something like that, because he was not following Jimmy's line. Okay, so let's continue.
Right. Sure.
This website, we feature their work here all the time, but you're going to see how they're misguided and why they're bound to lose, because they have no idea how to reach out to people who are aligned with themselves ideologically. He has no idea how to reach out to that guy who I brought on my show. Go watch the interview. The sweetest guy. He's been unemployed. He's gotten no socialist party to have a message, as we all to them.
Get to the actual video.
So here we go.
Here we go.
Sure. Listen, first of all, thank you for inviting me. But I must admit, when you invited me, and I'm more than happy to discuss the Hunts Point strike, which is very critical. I didn't realize who the guest before me was, and I must admit that it's very disturbing to believe that when you talk about left or progressive politics, that this has anything to do with the politics of the Boogaloo Boys and such extreme right-wing forces. This guy indicated, by the way, that he was at the demonstration in Lansing in April, which stormed the state capitol. And that was a demonstration which was very much aimed at opposing any lockdowns in the state of Michigan or lockdowns anywhere.
Because the government told people to lock their businesses down, Jerry, and then they didn't give them any money.
So which part were you more angry about, Jimmy? The lockdown of the business or not giving them money? I think I probably have a guess.
You can't really tell. He's just mad. He gets so mad at Jerry. And so he just, whatever comes to mind about what was wrong with lockdown. So he goes right to giving right-wing talking points about the lockdowns. And being really like status quo about it, because keep going. He's not done giving the reactionary.
So people were desperate. People are desperate, Jerry. I don't know if you know what's going on, but this isn't happening in any other country in the world. When they lock down your business in another country, they pay their workers their salary, and they give them health care. Neither of that is happening in this country, Jerry. And so that's why people were protesting against the lockdowns, because they weren't giving them any money. He leaves that part out conveniently so he can demonize deplorables.
Okay, pause it. So Jimmy's major mistake here, or rather the thing he's just being bullshitting about, is he's making it sound like there were workers at lockdown protests. It wasn't all bourgeois business owners, which is what Jerry is going to point out when talking about Magnus from the Boogaloo Boys, that he primarily identifies himself as a business owner. That makes him bourgeois, not a worker. So Jerry will continuously reply to Jimmy that no, I don't consider him a worker because he didn't say he's a worker. And Dore says keeps referring to him as a worker because Dore wants to see him as one, because they're pretty much workers in the same way. That Dore is actually also a business owner. And that's the real underlying pure ideology thing happening. That Dore is a bourgeois business owner type guy. He's from a working class background, I guess, but not anymore. And so when he talks of work, I mean, he can talk of workers, but then he's really confused about what actual like class politics is.
Oh yes,
and that's why this trot here, which I will take, any day over any day of the week over leftists like Dore or other left tubers even, despite all of their
certain ones,
attractions. But anyway.
Here we go.
The slightest measures to protect public health against.
So he's saying this about that guy I had on my show. That guy didn't say anything. Like I said, we never even talked about. Anyway, here we go.
Yeah, he didn't talk about lockdowns because it would show that he's just a chud at the end of the day.
Right.
That's what he was opposing. And why would any leftist want to work with a person who's just like, we're against the two-party system because they're the lockdowns?
Yeah. I seriously doubt that Boogaloo Boy had any reason to oppose the lockdowns other than he probably thought COVID was a false flag or whatever the nonsense talking points are.
So Rain says that is he clarifying that
You're saying that Boogaloo Boys are anarchists? Very left-leaning.
Well, they're right-wing anarchists, sure.
Yeah, I don't see them as
they're right-wing anarchists.
I don't know. Maybe you're seeing some interviews that I haven't, but so far.
By the way, all anarchists or right libertarians, they're not all villains in my eyes. I'm just saying they're not really going to play a part in class politics. Because they're in a different class than worker. They're not in the worker class.
Right. Yeah, they're advocating for the owner class. They just want to have a more fast and loose form of capitalism, and that's about it. Where the owners have even more power. So
because there are some of them anyway.
Yeah.
Them and the passive incomes they get from Bitcoin.
Sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's hard to even classify what Dore is. Rain. He is for himself, basically. That's how I've come to conclude it. Whatever.
Democratic socialist, but just like
maybe
practice. But we're trying to clarify. Like, there's different ways of identifying people. There's identifying people based on their positions, which is what we usually do, and it's helpful to do that. But I think it's more important to identify people based on what their strategy is for change, or their in that way, like how they actually want to do politics. That's what's more useful when organized.
Yeah, Jimmy just seems to want to yell at
Yeah.
candidates he helps get elected.
If your strategy is protesting, then you're just a liberal.
Yeah, just reformist, basically.
Right-wing demonstration financed by the Betsy DeVos and other right-wingers was used to advance the herd immunity policy, which has left more than 420,000 people dead in the United States. And in fact, one of the chief demands of the Hunts Point workers is against the terrible conditions that have led to 400 infections and 6 deaths amongst the Hunts Point workers. I mean, the idea that somehow this is the unity of left and right. I mean, what is there is a historical precedent. The Nazis called themselves revolutionists. They called themselves opponents of So
he's literally calling a guy who was a guest on my show right before him, a guy who's pro-LGBTQ, pro-Black Lives Matter, anti-police brutality, anti-war, anti-imperialism, and anti the two-party corporate duopoly. And he's anti-ICE. And this guy's calling him a Nazi.
Yeah, because he's probably a Nazbol. I mean, when it comes down to the politics of it, he may believe in some socialist ideas, but only for a select few. but it doesn't even sound like that.
Yeah. Now, as Rain points out, and this is something that like I'll be pointing out as this goes on, is there's a difference between like pointing to individuals who identify as Boogaloo Boys, and when you talk to them, their politics are in fact straight left anarchism. But then questions arise like, well, why don't you organize or be an activist as an anarchist? Why aren't you waving the red and black? Why aren't you doing IWW stuff? Or why are you doing it with this joke, like this meme work?
Well, and that's the thing is, even the title itself, Boogaloo, refers to Civil War II Electric Boogaloo. That's their big meme, which came out of some really reactionary online spaces. So, I mean, it just seems hard. You could be right, Rain, that some individuals are not falling into that, but it seems like overall they were a movement that was started with the idea of right libertarianism as their core. And
so we're always talking about the group and not individuals, which is sort of difficult to parse in the minds of our average, viewer or American.
Sure.
So, and it's something you're trained to do, or you self-train yourself through practice of just think. It's like a muscle of thinking in terms of class and groups instead of I have to talk to 100 individuals to make a judgment about an organization. Let's see. Unfortunately, anarchists are only about the destruction part. We can't rely on them to help us actually build anything.
Yeah.
Granted.
Really? I disagree with that.
But
I
they
don't
will
think
need
anarchists...
us in organizing if they will ever hope to have their sexy battles to begin with. Pretty. I do agree with that to most extents.
But anarchists are only about destruction, not the building part. I don't.
No. They're saying that like they want to do activism only in terms of like having civil war or fighting the government.
Sure, the Boogaloo Boys. Sure, yeah.
Not
I'm talking about
because then you're more than just an anarchist. You're a narco-syndicalist or a narco-communist. You get those other adjectives put on those qualifiers. Qualifiers, which basically refer to that political strategy. So that's why we always want it's a little cumbersome and annoying for normies, but like to actually have like those hyphenated political labels, where you say, well, one half of it is identifying your positions, and the other half is what you want to have, like where you want to be, or with the strategy. Okay.
It's kind of like the people like this on the left want to drive a wedge in our country.
Dude, it's already left and right. That's the wedge. Like
yeah. That's what he's saying, though. That's his point. That Jerry's position as a trot is that there are sides. But no. What Dore means is that like he sees the totality of America as being the people, the workers. But he those words get jumbled in his head. The people, working class, and property, homeowners. These are all the same group, the 99 basically. And then there's the problem with that slogan, at least in retrospect. I mean, it's still a good slogan, more or less, but it's saying that you have 99% that are really not the true capitalist ruling class. But a trot or other type of revolutionary will say, no, we can subdivide actually that there are 40% of Americans that are broke, another 30% that are poor and working, and then you have bourgeois, you have professionals that could be workers, and then there are professionals that own their own practice or they're business owners. So you have professionals like doctors that work under a hospital. They're still a worker because they're under a corporation.
Right.
But then you have doctors that have their own practice, and then they have the qualities of a bourgeois business owner that will talk of they need lower taxes and stuff.
Yeah, especially if they have employees underneath them in their own independent practice. That's true.
Right.
All right.
The international Jewish capitalist conspiracy. This has nothing to do with left politics. It has nothing to do with progressive politics. My movement, the Socialist Equality Party, we're seeking to build a genuine movement of the working class. That's why we've intervened among the striking workers at Hunts Point. We are above all internationalists. I mean, the right wing promotes nationalism. They tell American workers, as Trump does, that the cause of our problems are Mexican workers, workers stealing our jobs, everything the trade unions have promoted for 40 years that have produced a disaster for the working class. American workers are in a struggle against global corporations, global banks, and
He's just so, upset that he has to look elsewhere, or else.
You're right. I'm well, his glasses. He sort of does what I do when I don't want to pay attention to something. But he's checked out. He's not listening to him because he's not following his script, which is so ironic. It's when you realize. It's when I realized that Jimmy Dore really was full of shit. But it's because he had never been this outraged to a leftist before. But it's like he had him on specifically to berate him, which he sort of acts like isn't the case. It's like, I had you on to talk about the union, and that's or the strike, and that's what's important. But you didn't want to talk about that. That's what he gets mad about. So
we cannot take one step forward unless we unite with our brothers and sisters all over the world against the capitalist system.
But not people willing to unite with you in your own country. You're going to be able to vet people in other countries for their whatever it is you don't like about them. But a guy right here, who's, again, pro-LGBTQ, pro-Black Lives.
The fuck is he talking about? This made me like this. I was like, what the fuck is he talking about? Where you because he yes, Dore, you're being nationalistic when you want to unite with right wing workers against left-wing workers in Europe or Mexico. That's what's called being fucking racist. Because, you can vet other people in other countries because they have the internet too. And we can talk to them. We can write them. And we can read their lit or translate it. It's fucking easy. You know what's easy? Trying to figure out what some Americans think politically. But there's others in other countries, it's clear what they're about. They're easy to understand. And I'm like, I'm with them. The Communist Party in Nepal, based. Love them. They have half the government. They're cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Or Bhutan. Is it Bhutan? Yeah, I think it was Bhutan. You had a Communist Party there
Even the Indian Communist Party seems pretty correct with most of the things they come out with. So
yeah. They don't control the country. It's right wing government.
No, but it's a significant movement.
They have pockets, yes, and they were instrumental in in making the central government capitulate with the farmers. We can vet internationally, and because that's where you don't feel as alone. You feel alone as a leftist in America in the imperial core. When you look out in the world, there are tons of leftists out there, tons of movements. They're getting shit done. This new pseudo pink tide in South America. And it seems to be even doing better than last time. They're just getting elected. They haven't completed the mission yet. That's where we get into the things where things aren't going to be purist, where in the Submedia was pointing out that in Chile, the new left-wing president there isn't able to or hasn't been able to pardon the political prisoners that were arrested from the last government. So he hasn't done it, and he says he's not going to, or he can, or he's doing the Biden thing. Come on, man, give me a break. We just changed the Constitution, for God's sake. We're rolling back to the shades. You want me to release all the anarchists that burned burned things down? They actually committed crimes, But
right.
I'm not sure that's the case with that, though. I'm kidding.
No, but here Jimmy is criticizing the guy for saying he's vetting these people that he hasn't even met. But Jimmy didn't do any background research on the guy before he put the Boogaloo Boy up, and only because this guy has criticized Jimmy does he lash out so strongly and just so full of rage. So
did Left Twitter, and that's where Dore is like he. But this is when he really starts to shift into the anti-vax nonsense.
Oh God!
And being full reactionary, because the audience of Twitter lefties turned on them. So it's like, well, I'm not going to get them as an audience anymore, so I'm going to go reactionary, which just shows that he was never really about following certain politics. It's chasing an audience, and this is something that Jose.
That's what I was just gonna say.
When Jose did his breakdown of him and so on, so that's a different issues. I wanted to talk specifically about like left messaging and stuff because that's this is cool.
Lives matter. Anti-police brutality.
Already said this.
Let's see why this guy's never.
We'll skip ahead.
There are libertarian elements, right-wing elements like that. I mean, those are the people.
You're flirting with libertarian. Oh my God! You're not allowed to talk to libertarians. You're flirting.
You're platforming them, though, Jimmy. You're uncritically platforming. That's the problem.
That was the criticism that he uncritically platformed them. Left-wing libertarians, there's the caucus of them in the Libertarian Party. They
somehow, yes,
are, well, they're the poster boys for the people who are talking with the right libertarians and working with them. And it's a good effort. They do some good. They have converted people. They have done some deconverting in there, or at the very least changed their minds on like left-wingers not being complete evil, and things like that. They do act as a counter. Now they haven't made any headway, but some of them do run under the libertarian line sometimes. Again, it's there. You could say they're as effective nationally or in politics as the Workers' Equality Party, or what have you. But they are, in essence, they are Greens that didn't want to work with trots like Jerry here, where Jerry was like, you can't talk. Yes, you shouldn't interact. Not only you should interact, but it's just like it's not going to be our working class politics. It just doesn't include these types of libertarians. And
well, yeah, I mean, if they are libertarians that are,
there were enough Greens that didn't really. They were like, well, no, we do want to be able to do outreach because we have at least culturally and other things like they're nerds like us and they're and stuff, and that's the types are like the type who find, we're all damn it, Vermin Supreme fans. We're all
sure.
And that's why like he was their kind of pseudo candidate, I think, for president.
Yeah. All right, moving on.
With you're flirting? You mean I'm working with other Americans on a common interest? Like when Bernie Sanders works with that right-winger Mike Lee on Yemen, that's bad.
Those are senators.
Yeah, those are senators.
That's a false equivalence if I ever heard one, but yeah.
Right. Yeah.
The U.S. Capitol on January 6th.
This guy.
And they're being pulled around by the nose by very powerful political and corporate forces, using the anger that people feel over the economic disaster, small businesses being put out of work, but they are being mobilized for right-wing purposes. We oppose that.
So I just want to remind you who this guy is. So if you haven't seen that the video we dropped yesterday, the interview with him, you should go watch it. It's really fascinating.
Don't watch the Jerry interview. Don't watch that one.
No, okay.
I did, but Jerry's pretty based. I mean, he could be a better communicator or debater or whatever.
Sure.
But I think Jerry was not expecting to be interviewed like in a hostile way. But like if I was in Jerry's position, I would have been pretty flustered and just not gone in depth or whatever. But
yeah. So it seems that the only pushback Dore has here is the stuff where he's being personally criticized. He doesn't have any pushback about any of the talking points that socialist was putting forward.
Well, Jerry wasn't criticizing him. Yeah. He wasn't saying you're uncritically platforming, though I guess he wasn't definitely implying that, I suppose. But he was, that's basically what he was saying. He was saying like, what you were doing platforming the Boogaloo Boy, this particular one, is wrong because behind his I'm woke rhetoric He's like a corporation. He's wearing a rainbow flag, but underneath it, he's just a petite bourgeois owner, and he wants his business to be able to be open and unregulated, even during pandemic.
Yep. So yeah, there's nothing to do with workers getting compensation and having any ability to survive a pandemic themselves. He just wants to do his damn business. Jeez. All right. Should we skip forward more in this, or?
Yeah, because the next 5-10 minutes is just him repeat. Yeah.
All right. Let's see where we're at.
He repeats that Magnus is a swell guy. And Jerry kind of repeats himself a few times, since Dore does.
Sure.
Repeats the question of like, how could you say that we shouldn't work with him? And Jerry he doesn't elaborate on like, I'm talking class politics, not just this individual. Because that's what he does. He's talking about the group.
That's true.
Boogaloo Boys, or just in general, he just describes reactionary politics. But in Dore's mind, the guy he talked to, Magnus, doesn't fit that.
Yeah. He doesn't tick all the boxes.
If you do an economic analysis, he does. Because when it comes to lockdown protests, they were right-wing reactionaries or capitalists.
Yeah.
So
capitalist sympathizers.
Yeah. You didn't have worker group showing up there.
Right. Oh, Jimmy. Was there more of the video that you wanted to cover?
I guess we covered all the general points. You could skip farther ahead. I forget if there was
anti-racist, anti-war, and anti-police brutality, and you still want to shit on those people?
Really
that's not. You're not really in goodwill. You're not. You're not talking in goodwill. You're not being. This is fucking horrible.
This is live. This is him yelling at Jerry. Yeah, he's yelling at Jerry, and then Jenny's like grinning, like, "I'm so bummed. I'm so."
Is that I can't tell. Is that a grimace? Is he just that proud of himself for his tirade? Or?
I can't tell. It's a little both, probably.
Weird.
Doing. So anyway, all right. Well, thanks, Jerry, for coming on. Do you want to talk about the strike? Do you want to talk about the strike at all, or do you want to keep bullshitting like this?
I'll certainly talk about the strike. The strike is a very significant one. 14.
So the strike that he was brought on to talk about was the strike that's happening in New York City.
Why did he cut him off? He was describing what the strike was. Jimmy.
He has to give his own version of what he said. You
can't let the guy say anything on his own. He always has to preface.
That is in the largest produce market in the world, and they were striking for $1 an hour raise, $4 a week. They wanted to raise. Right now, they're in poverty wages. They make about $37,000 a year, and that's poverty wages for a family of 4 in New York City. And so that was what we were brought up on to talk about. And all he wanted to talk about was the lockdown and COVID and Boogaloo Boys and Donald Trump, and he didn't want to talk about anything else. It was mental. It was a mental interview. You saw it, and you saw him.
Jimmy is doing a React Andy to his own React Andy.
Yeah,
that's why I saved this particular video, because it was just so I think only Vosh has done this number of levels.
Yeah.
Where it's like it's like where Vosh has done it where like the instead of Jerry, it's him talking.
Yeah.
And then it'll be him commentating on his debate. And then he'll be commenting on his commentary.
Commenting on the commentary, just infinite regression.
but the fact that you'll have Jimmy ranting at Jerry while interviewing him, and then he'll pause it to rant about Jerry's answer. That's why.
Before he even gives it. And he's wearing the same damn shirt, too, which is like, did he do the interview just like a few hours ago? No,
and I want to clarify, just as Jerry kind of does this, that Magnus can be a great guy. But the movement in general, like whether he's talking about an anti-lockdown protest, which Magnus was there at, is bad, or at least doesn't fit with labor politics.
Completely slandering that guy who didn't say anything like the things he said he was saying. So here, I'll play this because it's worthwhile. Here we go.
100 workers have been on strike for a week long. This is in a city where 26,000 people have died from COVID. As I said, at least 6 of these workers have. The banks on Wall Street have been bailed out to the tune of trillions of dollars. So these workers went out on strike because they're fighting for a decent living standard, for a meager $1 raise. The response of the government has been to send the police to the picket lines.
Can you pause?
Yeah.
Now, usually my first instinct is that him saying banks were bailed out, seems like a unnecessary thing to put in when talking about labor struggle. But it doesn't seem to be redundant when faced with the recent clip of Bill Maher being unaware that Wall Street and the banking sector was in fact bailed out again during the pandemic.
Right. I saw that. That was
so
ridiculous that he didn't know that.
That's probably why he's used to, in his talking points when talking to anybody, that he needs to mention that the banks were bailed out again or recently, because it's not common knowledge. It wasn't reported like a big deal. Right. Because unlike in 2009, it went over, and they're just doing it again with less fanfare each time they do it. So it is on us, lefties, to actually tell people that it's happening. Because
like I can understand Jimmy not...
Center left aren't talking about it. They don't even know.
I can understand this having not gotten on Jimmy's radar because he doesn't do any research for any of his shows. But Bill Maher, who supposedly has his finger on the pulse of politics in America,
he never has. He never has.
I know he never has, but how do you not know that? How is that? I don't know.
I was pretty naive, teenager when I thought Bill Maher had good. He had his finger on the pulse.
Yeah.
It was post Occupy that I'm like, oh, he actually is not in touch with what politics are.
Yeah. He had some good moments after 9/11 when he called out the cowardice of the U.S. military.
Yeah.
But
sorry.
No, actually got canceled for it. But from that point on, I don't know.
Well, I rewatched his old show in Politically Incorrect, and a lot of it, a lot of old episodes. And my general conclusion, though I can't tell any anecdotes because I was rewatching a long time ago. It was from a library rental, I think.
Oh, okay.
So it was just one episode. My general take, my conclusion was this wasn't really ahead of its time. It wasn't doing anything that other things in the aughts. I mean, it was a 90s show, and it definitely fits in that category. And Bill Maher doesn't really say anything particularly novel then. No, it was only when he said, and even in the episode where he says that he thought they weren't cowards, he was still just it was still just center left takes all the way with him. So he really hasn't changed whatsoever with how he talks about things.
He even brags about that. He's like, I haven't changed. The left has changed. I'm the same person I was 20 years ago. That's kind of the definition of conservatism, isn't it, Bill? But anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a little bit more. Let me just stop. So what you're saying, and we've brought this up on the show before, is that even when someone like Bernie Sanders, who's pro-union and pro-worker in the United States, doesn't realize that what we really need is a union of North American workers, or all workers internationally, because what that happens is then we pit our auto workers against Mexico's auto workers, and they're pitted against Canada's auto workers. And that's a big problem, right?
Of course it is. And right now, the workers in Matamoros are once again preparing strikes at the Maquiladora factories. You had covered that in January 2019, 2 years ago. And the workers in Mexico, in Matamoros, which is on the border with Brownsville, Texas, marched to the border of the United States, and they said, "Gringos, wake up!"
Quick. So what he's trying to do is he's super aggressive and uncharitable, but he does to be Jared-Charitus on my own end, that he does attempt to bring things back on track by he doesn't ask a real question of him. He simply states something that he will agree with. right? So he can nod and looks and feel smart and smug and that, like, okay, we are on the same page. But Jerry, like an asshole, he will in the tail end of his answer, or just his side of the conversation, he will bring it back around to not being reactionary. And so Dore just gets pissed again. And so this cycle happens. So, all right.
Well, I almost get the feeling that Dore was like, how can I recover this segment that I've already done? I really feel like I need some backup here. Who better to back myself up than myself?
Yeah, because Rob McClone will not back him up on this.
We're in the same struggle. That is left wing. That is socialist. To unite the working class internationally.
Yeah.
The Boogaloo Boys, fascists are nationalists.
Okay.
They say we have to protect our
Jerry.
country.
All right, Jerry, stop it. We talked about it.
It's
Jerry,
significant
stop it.
because
Come on.
We have to clarify workers on these
Those
questions,
people-
not be confused by such questions.
I got you. Jesus Christ. The
What an
fucking guy
egghead.
comes on. He says he's pro BLM. He's anti-police. He's anti-war.
okay.
What the fuck? And you still got to do that. It's just ridiculous. That's the opposite of what you should be doing. You should be trying to find common ground with workers, and then you convince.
Cheap shot.
He really feels like he nailed him there. Like he's laughing about it in his live react there.
Yeah.
But like, no, you
Let it
don't have to
alone,
just-
Jerry. Let it alone.
Well, sure, but really, no, you don't have to just take people at their word when they say, "I believe this, and the other thing." You have to look at their actions. You have to look at, how their group as a movement has behaved, and what they have actually taken stances for. Not just one person who happens to say the things that you're looking for them to say, "Oh, you're on my team." Who's the worst justice of all time, says ABN 725. Boy, right now it's seeming like Clarence Thomas, but
I hate them all equally.
yeah.
Only there were
They all
some
suck.
exceptions, like Harlan. So it's best to say
Yeah.
who's the good justice. So I would say Justice Harlan. And,
Sure.
And I
Sure,
guess
what we talked about earlier. Not Alito? I mean, they're all pretty terrible right now. So
Alito's dead.
Alito?
Oh, I'm
Alito?
thinking of someone else.
You're thinking Scalia. Scalia died.
Oh, Scalia. Okay.
Yeah, he was.
Jesus
He's definitely up there as
These
one of the
guys,
worst of all time.
they're all the same to me. I don't. Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, Scalia was responsible for the whole supreme executive
That's right.
power.
That's right. Scalia was a
legal
Bush
theory.
guy, and
Yeah.
Alito is Bush Jr. guy.
Yeah. So yeah, that could be up there. That's a good candidate. But let's
All
get
right.
back to the video at
I
hand.
think we're almost done with this.
Yeah, I don't know if there's much more that Jimmy's going to say then.
Convince them of the other
repeating.
shit you try to convince them of. You don't run around calling people fucking fascists and racists when they aren't.
When they
When
say
they're
they're
just
not.
regular Americans and they fucking have been shut out of work like everybody else, and they show up at protests to fucking protect Black Lives Matter, and you run around shitting at them like a fucking guy. This doesn't help. That's not helpful. You have some
Well,
great
it's not-
ideas,
it's
but what
not
you're doing is
personal.
not helpful. That's just ridiculous when you keep doing that over and over. And we had
it's
this
not a
conversation
it's not a-
already. This conversation
it's-
already about that part is over. Can we talk about the goddamn strike in fucking New York City without you smearing some guy who was just on my show 5 seconds ago who said the exact opposite shit of what you're attributing to him? He said the exact opposite of every fucking thing you're saying he said.
But there's a logic to politics, Jimmy.
Okay.
There's a logic to politics. There, you can't bring the left and the right together on the basis of we're all opposing the powers that be. There is a fundamental division between left politics, which is for the unity of the working class across national boundaries, for the ending of capitalist private ownership, and right-wing politics, libertarian politics, which is against the minimum wage, which is against the slightest restrictions on business interests. They manipulate the powers that be.
Yeah, so then you fight them on those issues you disagree with, and you join with them on the issues you agree with. Just because I'm joining with a libertarian to oppose war doesn't mean I'm against the minimum wage. That's a totally different thing. So now I can't join with someone who's against war because they have a different view about the minimum wage that I
I mean,
Yes.
yeah,
Because
yes, definitely.
we're fighting war with strikes. They're fighting war by buying Bitcoin. That's the difference.
Right.
Right. I'm really essentializing it, but that's what's going. That's where Jerry and other leftists come from.
Sure. And not to mention,
fighting the same way.
Famously, Richard Spencer had a big anti-war campaign during the Trump administration because he was isolationist and didn't want America to even bother with anyone else. So no, you don't join with people like that because they're anti-war.
I agree. I agree with Spencer. I don't like all these Ukrainian flags all everywhere.
Right.
Unless
right.
we have common ground and we can have a united slate of candidates.
Yeah, right.
So I sent another link that we can wrap up with. It's a short video. It's very funny and it's awesome.
無所属
Sure.
富山光一
We need to make that
36歳
Now this is something I want to act
反
out,
管理教育運動を出発点に
but when
異端的
Okay. I wonder if the closed captioning is going to work because that's very small closed caption. No closed captioning available.
that sucks. But anyway, I want you going this cold, so I'm not going to say anything else.
Sure.
的極左活動家とな
He's
り
an extreme left-wing
今
activist.
時
In
政
this
治犯
day
とし
and
て
age,
2年
he
投
was
獄され
imprisoned 2 years for
現
the
在に
political
至る
crimes.
反体制知識
He is
人
an anti-establishment
では
intellectual.
続いて
The
富山
following is
光一さ
Mr.
んの
Toyama
政見放送
Koyoshi's
です
political broadcast. Koichi. Excuse me.
Mr. Lee.
私が富山光一で
I'm
ある。
Toyama Koichi.
諸君、
Gentlemen,
この国は最悪
the
だ。
nation is horrible.
政治改革だとかなん
I
と
have no
か改
interest
革。
whatsoever in reform of any
私
kind
は
of
そんな
reform.
ことには一切興味がない。
What?
あれこれ改革して問
Nothing
題
will
が
be
解
solved by
決するよう
reforming
な
or。changing anything.
もはやそ
You're
んな
no
甘っ
longer
ちょ
such
ろい
an
段階には
optimistic
ない。
state.
こんな国はもう見捨
You
て
must
るしかない
abandon
んだ。
this detestable
こんな
nation.
国はもう
This
滅ぼせ。
nation must be destroyed.
私には
Wow.
I do not have a single
建設
constructive
的な提案
hope.
なんか一つもない。今はただ
The only thing
Scrap
was
and
even
scrap.
scrap.
全てをぶち壊すことだ。
Everything that exists.
諸君、
Gentlemen,
私は諸君を軽蔑してい
I
る。
despise each and every one of you.
このくだらない国を
The people who support this worthless nation, this system
変え
is
てきたのは諸君に
you.
他ならないからだ。正確に言えば、
To be precise,
諸君の中の多数
the
派は
people who are watching this are
私
my
の敵だ。
sworn enemies.
Wow.
私は
I'm calling
諸
upon
君の中の
minorities
少数派に呼びかけている。少数派の諸君、
to the people of minority.
今こそ団結
We must
し、
unite
立
and
ち
rise
上
up
がら
with
な
me.
ければならない。
I'll let you take over.
奴ら多数派はや
The
りたい
people
放
of the
題だ。
majority do what they
我
want to
々少
us.
数派が
But now
いよい
following
よ
a
もって
world
生き
where
に
the
くい世の
minority
中
will
が
not
作ら
so
れようと
easily
し
be
ている。
oppressed is being constructed.
少数派の諸君、
The people of the minority.
選挙で何かが
If
変
you
わる
think
と
you
思
can
ったら
change
大間
something
違い
by
だ。
voting, you are completely wrong.
所詮選挙なんか
An election is simply a festival for the majority.
我々少数派に
There
とっ
is
て
nothing
選
as
挙ほど
idiotic
バカバ
as
カ
an
しいものはない。
election to us minority
多
people.
数決で決めれば多
If
数
you
派が
choose
勝つに決
by
まってるじゃな
majority
いか。
vote, of course the majority wins.
じゃあどうして立候補する
Right.
Probably. Wonder why I'm
I'm
in
in
the
the
election then.
And the
Because
story will be
this-
too long.
掲示板のポスターを見て
Just
くれ
look。at my posters on the political bulletin.
ポスターは2種類ある
Two
から、
times. So
ど
be
ちら
sure
も
to
見
read.
逃さないように。私は
I can
この
no
国の
longer tolerate the oppression of this
少
nation's
数派に
minority.
対する迫害にもう我慢ならない。少数派の諸君、
To the people
多
of
数
the
派を
minority,
説得す
there's
ること
no
な
way
ど
we
できない。
can persuade the majority.
奴ら多数派は我々少数派の声に
The
耳を
people of the
傾けるこ
majority
と
will
はない。
not, under any circumstances, listen to our
奴ら
voices.
多数派が支配する。
A fucked
こん
up
なくだらない
nation
国は
like this, where the majority
もはや滅ぼ
rules,
す以外
has
にない。
no other option than to
改
be
革なんかいくらやったって
destroyed.
無駄
No
だ。
matter how much reform is done, there is
今
no
進められ
hope.
ているさまざまな改革は
Every single
どう
one
せ
of the
全部
political
全
reforms
て奴
being
ら多数派
proposed
のため
are
の
all
改革じゃない
reforms
か。
to the majority of the people.
我々少数派は
We
そ
the
んなものに
minority.
期待しない。
Obviously will not
も
support.
ちろん協力
We're
はし
gonna
ない。
support these reforms.
anticipated results from
我
any of
々
these
少数
reforms.
派はもうこん
We
な
the
国に
minority
何
no
も望
longer
まない
ask anything from such a nation.
我々少数派に残された選
We the
択肢はただ
minority
一つ
only have option
こんな
left
国はもう滅
to
ぼすことだ
obliterate the nation.
ぶっちゃけて言えば
To be completely honest,
もはや政府転覆しか
not,
ない
the only path we have to is to overthrow
少数
the
派の諸
government.
君
I speak to the people of the minority.
これを機会に
Let us use our broadcast, my broadcast as an opportunity to further our precious, our ferocious, terrifying plans to overthrow the
進
government.
めていこうではないかポスターに
Wow.
連絡先が
There's
書いてある
information on how to contact me on the
選挙
posters.
期間中でも
I do
Do not
not
care
care
if
if
you
you
contact
contact
me
me
before
before
or
or
after
after
the
the election. Sure.
私に一
Okay.
本電話を
Please
入
give
れ
me
て
a
くれ
phone call.
もちろん
Of course.
Well,
I
選
do
挙権
not
のない
care.
未成年の職
I do
員
not care if you are
東
underage
京
and
都
not
以外の
have
職
voting
員でも
rights,
構わない
or if you live outside the city of.
我々少数派には
Elections, I'm never even
選
doing
挙
that.
なんかもともと全然関係ないんだから
I love that.
最後に
Very emphatic. One thing left to state, just in case.
私が当選
If I get elected,
奴らは
We
ビビ
will
る
be terrified.
they
私
I
もビビる
will be terrified.
富山光一に悪意の一票
You're gonna go
富
to
山
one
光一に
silent
やけっ
listen
ぱち
vote.
の一
One
票
desperate vote.
じゃなきゃ投票なんか行くな
If not,
ど
don't
う
go
せ
out
選
vote.
挙じゃ
I'm
何も
never
変
doing
わら
the
ないんだ
elections
よ
anyway.
was that the middle finger?
No, it's index. Correct.
無所属
That
This
was.
富山光一さんの政権
That's that's quite the platform.
Now, for context, this man is an artist. He is a
Okay.
musician,
Okay,
and he is doing satire.
that's pretty good.
But
That's
he
pretty
is-
damn good.
He
did
is,
not
a,
drop
as
any-
you can say, as you can see, hardcore anarchist type, with the
That's
all
cool.
black. And there's another clip of him I watched where he's on stage. He's in an actual musician's environment, and he's kind of makes it. It's not a joke or an observation that, like, so long as America is involved in Japanese politics, I would like to have a vote in American elections.
Makes sense to me.
Or as long in every country that America has a base or an interest, everyone there should be able to vote in American elections.
Well, yeah, that actually does make sense. So
So I first watched that. That's back from 2010 or 09. And even though it was super extreme and whatever, and it was really vague, of course, that's part of the satire. It's vague. Who's the majority? Who's the minority? But it doesn't matter. He's right when it comes to bourgeois elections. They are festivals of the majority. I love that.
That's-
phrase. Festival of
yeah.
the majority.
true.
Even though, and this is my big gripe to point out, is that when it comes to elections, actually the minority are the ones who vote in them. So
True enough as well.
he's but in Japan and other countries, a majority do in fact vote. But it's like, let's say it's a 60-40, but that's what's fun about it, is like, who is he really talking to? But at the same time, he is talking to a general, like, no reform will help. Elections don't
Yeah,
matter.
yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
I'm listening to this guy, like, and this is after the Tea Party midterms, and I'm like, he does have a point though. And that's when I start probably not this alone, of course. Adbusters helps and stuff. I start considering actual anarchistic ideas in politics.
Cool.
So that
That was good. That's a good way to end. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
I love that guy, and I want to record an English version of that, like acted out in the same way.
Yeah.
I need it's a sub project, I guess.
There we go.
Maybe I'll just do an audio version to start with, and then I'll do when I run for office, I'll do a joke and a joke version of that.
That'd be great.
Work it in
I
all,
would love to see that.
and make it clear it's like banner under, like, this is satire.
Yeah, Americans we're not too
So this-
savvy when it comes to the satire. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But it'll still be put on a opposition research flyer. Dan Plaat says he wants to destroy the system.
Yeah.
And then the minority must rise up. Who is the minority in Albany? Well, if you ask, depending on who you ask, everyone in Albany feels like a minority of some.
Yeah, if we're talking
Homo
in
is for the
terms of
ballot
class power.
minority.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock. How are we feeling?
Pretty good. That was a lot of good stuff to cover. I'm glad we finally got to do Jimmy Dore on the show. I've been wanting to cover him for a while because he just keeps drifting off for the right word, it seems.
I found just the right clip. There's a number of things that maybe line up with his shift that I think maybe, and it depends on. It's hard to know what the causality at work is. That like Ron Clone stops being on his show and breaks off from him. It's really when Ron Clone starts doing more Green Party stuff. So I think maybe being around when he interviewed Greens, I don't know if this caused Ron to move towards Green Party politics, but he would do our fundraisers and stuff. And maybe this caused a split, or maybe he just used Jimmy as a launching path, just as Jimmy used Young Turks.
Sure. Yeah, that could be.
But that's something good out of there. And Ron McClone isn't there, and he would be the left-wing voice, actually, or no, there was the other guy too who was more left-wing than Jimmy, and not a reactionary. I forget his name though, or what his.
I'm not sure.
He was this other guy who just does not do anything with Jimmy now, or I don't see him.
Yeah, I never was really that close of a follower of Jimmy Dore. I was always kind of more.
But now his regular guest is like a jagoff comedian like himself. So
I'm sure he just loves that.
He's in more of an echo chamber than ever. Where before it would be someone who was like a Jordan Chariton type, or others from the Young Turks who were more left than Shank, so they left too.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So that's what I saw, because I was a close follower of Jimmy up until the pandemic started, basically. But basically, this video was the last straw. I'm like, that, and I think the last time I watched him was when he interviewed Howie, I guess, to see what happened, when that was more hostile than not, or skeptical, or just like, why are you even bothering? He didn't really say that, but like he didn't have a supportive tone, which is he never had, like kind of usually had before. But it's funny that once you actually have a socialist running as the Green Party candidate, it's like now it's a problem. There's this, we're partisan. We're too partisan. They actually do want a Green Party that's just like, we're not the left or the right. We're forward, which is still the messaging in most of the European Green parties. But the result is you get, Greens in Germany are pretty successful, but now when, they get a shortage of gas from Russia, and now they have to turn their coal plants back on, and it's the Greens that have to approve that. They're just stuck, and they're just stuck being the managers of the status quo, but with significantly more greenwashing, though. But like the real radical proposal would be like, okay, we're not getting gas from Russia anymore, or we don't want to. Fine, we're actually going to cut like consumption. Can't do that. Capitalism will not allow that. Okay.
All right. So let's see. I will link your show in the chat so people can go check out your work.
Yep, I do have. I just uploaded today my newest episode. It's an hour long. They will be an hour long now. They're not picking on national politics or organizing issues, but I think there's still more to learn there, since when I talk about, the local is the national, all politics is local. My experiences or why local news will have, you can relate to it, and I'll always be relating it to the general issues anyway. So it might still be, for a national audience, still be worth listening to.
Yeah, I think
but
so.
But very much so. Check out my backlog, close to 150 episodes, where I talk about every kind of leftist issue. And organizing debate. Yep,
and I can attest they're all very great. I don't think I've ever listened to a dud episode of yours. So
great!
I highly recommend it.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Yeah. everything's in flux with me with the station right now, so I'm not going to plug that at the moment. But yeah, otherwise, join the Green Party, join some other socialist org or party. DSA isn't a real party. I mean, they can act like one, but
yeah, I don't know that they'll ever take that leap. Yeah,
it's fun when what I would consider to be more normie family members are in fact an uncle of mine was campaigning for a DSA candidate.
Oh yeah,
particularly because it's in the primary. So, which is in New York, our Democratic primary is this Tuesday. So I'm not participating because I'm not a Democrat, but I don't. But I will be. But my show will be a discussion with, I guess, my Democratic Socialist colleagues who do DSA politics, and they wanted to have at the station in the legislative coverage. So
Gotcha.
I'm gonna host that.
Do they have closed primaries in your state? Is that how it works? Like, do you have to be registered? You have to be registered as the. Yeah, we have open primary or open caucuses or primaries or whatever.
Oh,
we
in
decide to do.
Minnesota, in Minnesota.
Yeah, we do. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be registered one way or another. So anyway, yeah. If any of you out there are in New York and registered as Democrat,
participate if it matters.
Participate. Yeah.
There's certainly been a lot. There's certainly a lot of primary challenges from the left, at least social democrat left. And in my uncle's case, he's the assemblyman, or was it Congress or Assembly, but he had been there. He's like 30 years old. I mean, he's been in office 30 years. So his line to when he canvassed wasn't based on DSA talking points or policies. Just like, I retired 6 years ago. He hasn't.
Sure.
And we're the same age.
Wow.
So, okay. Good night, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks for being on, Dan. It's always a pleasure. Can't wait to see what we come up with next time. And so next time Dan will be on for sure. We'll be in a couple weeks, and otherwise, tends to drop in from time to time during the weekly shows. So you may see him again there too.
A little less so. I need to prioritize this project that I have.
Understandable. Good luck with
But
that.
I am always tempted though when I see.
Sure. Yeah. All right.
Bye.
See you next time.
Good night. Love you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thanks for all the comments and chat. That's been very appreciated. Thanks to the new followers and chatters. Always good to have new people in. Thanks for Freddie Yeti and Epic Prawn for stopping by. It's good to meet you guys recently, and go check out their shows as well. They are both on Twitch. In fact, if you're going to be up later tonight, in about half an hour, Freddie Yeti will be starting his meme stream. So I highly recommend you check that one out. I'm going to go ahead and link that one in the chat right before we log off now, because, again, I don't think we have enough people to raid anyway. So we'll just do a shout out instead to Freddie Yeti. Really fun guy. Let's see if I can find the channel. Freddie Yeti. There we are. So go check out that stream if you're going to be on in a half hour's time. Otherwise, good night, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow night. We're going to be continuing on with Chapter 4 of A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. I made a mistake last week. I jumped ahead a chapter, so we'll be coming back to Chapter 4 instead of continuing on with Chapter 5. And hopefully Trisha will has her connection issues taken care of this time, so she'll be able to join as well. All right. Have a good night, everybody.